and looking at some positions from boards 4 to 6 of the Lichess 45-45 League Season 12, which has just finished. Oh, okay, that's good. Glad to hear from someone in the chat. That means it's working finally. Yeah, so I'm up against King's Crusher and Andrew Tang, and also against in 1 hour against Belgium playing football. So, yeah. This will be a good stream though. We're going to be looking at some, not some of the some of the lower boards in the Lichess League. So just to say something about the Lichess 45 League. So every 10 weeks or so, there is a tournament on Lichess of teams of 6 players who play 1 round every week. So every team member plays 1 game, and it's of 45 plus 45 chess. And if you're interested in joining up, then I should show a picture of, the website is lichess4545.com, where you can find all the information. And we've just completed season 12, and there were more teams than ever in season 12, with 40 teams, as you can see here. So with the top 3 teams, gold, silver, and bronze, went to We're Not Okay With Any Name Actually, Pineapple Pizza Connoisseurs Reloaded, and All You Need Is Luft. But altogether 40 teams, and so the winning team, We're Not Okay With Any Name Actually, second team, Pineapple Pizza Connoisseurs Reloaded, and third team, All You Need Is Luft. So I'll put that information up again at the end. But while people are joining us, I just want to share a puzzle from a board 6 game that a very, very nice position. Now when I say puzzle, I should really, as it says there, it's a sort of like an analysis room, because it's not about there being one solution necessarily, but it's about how black should go about playing this kind of position. So white has got his king stranded in the middle of the board, and the black queen is positioned perfectly to execute some kind of finish very soon. What actually happened in this game was black wasn't able to. So what actually happened in this game was rook takes rook, knight takes rook, queen takes knight check, and then the king ran back, and I managed to find some kind of safety. So yeah, whenever you're trying to so if you've got the king in this sort of, so you've got the king exactly where you want him, in the middle of the board and cut off. So the first thing is you have to keep the king stranded in the middle of the board, not able to run back. And the second thing is you have to somehow remove all the defenders that are stopping you from mating that king. Welcome, Styly. So this is a puzzle I'm going to end the stream on, but while people are joining us, I'm also just going to leave it here as something I think is quite a nice position that came up. In this is a game between colwem as white and IMC Grat 2 as black. And at the end of the stream, I'll show the various ways that black could have gone about winning this game. In the end, though, it was a draw. And how to go about winning these sorts of positions. It's not so. I mean, it depends on the tactics, but just ideas. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we could get started with the games proper, but maybe I'll just wait a couple more minutes to let people think about this problem, and then we'll discuss the solution at the end. Okay, so this, as I said, was a board 6 game. Okay, well, we'll come back to how should black continue in this position in order to win. We'll come back to that at the end of the stream, so that's something to look forward to. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so if people are interested in the Lichess 45 League, again, look at lichess4545.com. In order to participate in the league, you have to join an application called Slack. It's difficult for me um, to post links. Let me see, unless someone else has posted it already. But yeah, I'll just say I'm okay. Okay, so let's get started. So Slack is an application for communicating. It has a kind of bot. So when two players are playing each other, the players get notified when they're playing on their mobile phones, and the bot picks up that they started playing, and it posts the link. So all the things that happen in the Crazy House World Championship, which happen manually, because I've been helping organise the Crazy House World Championship and posting the links. All these things are done manually there. Well, on Slack, there's something called Chester, a bot that does all those operations. Okay, so this is a cool black to play position that we'll end on. But okay, to begin at the beginning, we're going to look at a game. Ooh, start in the middle. We're going to look at a game. That was quite an interesting position to start on, though. We're going to look at a game between AvocadoPost and juped on board 4. And it's a Scotch Gambit. Okay. So Scotch seems to be quite popular in the league, and certainly at this level. So just to give a quick recap, if white takes this pawn, that's the Scotch game. If white doesn't take it, often white plays bishop c4 or plays what some consider much more adventurous Goering Gambit with c3, d takes c3, and then you could take it back with knight takes c3, or you could go bishop c4 here. If you go bishop c4 here, takes. So white has sacrificed a pawn, but it's got two very active bishops. So it's quite an interesting position. And if you want to see more about the Scotch Gambit and this sort of thing, there's a very good St. Louis Chess Club video by Schranz where he discusses the Scotch Gambit. And just for fun, if white takes with the knight instead of going bishop c4, and if black goes d6, and if white goes bishop c4, there's a little trap here. So knight f6 is good, but if black goes bishop to g4, there's a white can get an advantage by so black might hope to pin this knight and say with this, attacking both the bishop and the knight at the same time, hoping to open up the black king. There's a little bit of a trap here. White can simply take that knight and lose his queen, and it's Legal's mate that crops up in this position. So you have to watch out for that. Yes, so yeah, the Schranz videos, chess openings, explain chess openings, I really recommend them on St. Louis Chess Club. So yeah, after this video or another time, do check those out. Okay, but this game is quite interesting because AvocadoPost plays the Scotch Gambit, but he does the bishop c4 variation, and the juped as black played a more unusual. I mean, so the main line here would be bishop b4 check, here takes, and drop the bishop back. But he went for a more unusual bishop e7, and that's called the Benima defense. Okay, and AvocadoPost was intent on playing this gambit. So it's a sort of like a modified going gambit. And so this, I wouldn't be surprised if this put black a little bit out of book, but I'm not sure. So there are lots of ideas with this move. So you're activating a lot of pieces. And in particular, I was thinking of how the queen can come here and the queen could come here. But But the one thing white always has to watch for in this position is the knight could also come here, hitting both bishop and queen. I mean, obviously, yeah. So we have these ideas, but notice that black could actually stop this idea straight away with knight a5. And the bishop doesn't really have a nice home to go to. It could drop back to e2, and then so something like this could happen. And I think this would be quite a safe way of playing this rather dangerous position for black. Another way black could play it is with d6, and this also would be so this the pawns look quite threatening, but again it feels like quite a safe way of playing it as black, and so you're not taking up the but by taking the pawn you're accepting the gambit. And by accepting the gambit, you have to know whenever you take in a gambit, you this will be uploaded to YouTube as well. Yes, whenever you take in a gambit, I think this people ask, like, when should I do opening preparation, or should I just play natural moves? The parts of openings you really need to prepare are obviously if you reject a gambit, you can often just play natural moves and without too much preparation. But if you're going to accept a gambit, or have a gambit accepted on you, you have to know what lines to play. And white plays this very aggressive move, going directly for mate. And this is a fascinating position, because it's quite difficult to see how black can defend against this mate. But we're still in book, as it were. Even maybe the players were or were not in book, but this is still some kind of book. It has been played at the masters level a few times. So black has only one defense of this queen takes f7 checkmate, which of course is knight h6, but that's no defense at all, because the bishop can simply pick up that knight. So, but that is the best move for black, and black has a trick up his sleeve. He can castle, and now he's threatening pawn takes pawn, and then winning a queen. And if white plays the natural move of let's save this bishop, while also protecting this pawn, it would be a very natural thing to do. Black has a trick. He can go knight here, attacking the queen and attacking this square, so to pick up the exchange. Notice here, so notice here, black is a piece down, but he could pick up a rook in the corner, and then might have, and this would still be quite an equal position, because it'd be quite hard to get the knight out again. But I think black would be slightly better. So white would definitely try. So actually white's best move in this position is actually to give up the rook. But if white tries to keep the rook, the only move he can do to save to avoid this check is this. But this falls. Well, you have to give your piece back. Scotch gambits, yeah, very interesting positions come from Scotch gambits. So you have to give the piece back, and then you play on peacefully. But in this position, white has lost all the gambit advantage he once had, and it's black's pieces who are very nicely developed. White still needs to develop the white bishop, and actually black's got an advantage in development and is also up a pawn. So so white's gambit doesn't pay off if he doesn't know his theory. Okay, so actually, if this did happen, where you're threatening this check, actually the best move in this position, if you've made the mistake of going back to c1, is queen h5. Just give up that rook, and it's a little bit tricky for the knight to get out in this position. I mean, so the knight could try and come out immediately, but let's see. The squares are... okay, maybe it could come out immediately. Let's see. Maybe it just could come out to here. Yeah, h4. I should... Is there any way of white stopping that knight getting out? So maybe there isn't. I'd have to look deeper. So that's actually the best way for white to play this. But the best move for white in this position, and the move that AvocadoPost found, so he'd obviously prepared, or maybe not, but he knew what he was doing so far, is the best move in this position. So just to recap the game so far: Scotch Gambit, kind of delayed Goering kind of position. So this is quite unusual, but it has been played a few times at the master level. And the correct move is bishop takes g7. So the bishop is indirectly stopping pawn takes pawn, pawn takes rook equals queen. And so what's the correct move for black in this position? Obviously you have to take this bishop. Oh, yeah. So that's the problem. The correct move for black in this position is taking that bishop. So this looks like a very tempting move. It looks like a very good move because you're threatening this and you're threatening the queen at the same time, and you're thinking, oh, I'll just take back the bishop later. And if the queen, let's see, if the queen moves, well, so this is what actually happened in the game. So but this is a mistake actually, because white can go queen to e5, both stopping any idea of pawn takes pawn, pawn takes rook, while also defending his bishop. And there are also ideas of going queen g3 and just unleashing a devastating mating attack. So if white had properly prepared, I mean, this is already quite deep into the opening prep, but if the correct move against knight b4 was queen e5, and I saw in the match comments after the game, Juped said the moment he played knight b4, he saw this queen e5 move and was panicking. So yeah, what can black play in this position? So there are also threats of like mate on g7. So if we could if we can block. We'd like to play f6 to disconnect this queen from the bishop, but we can't because of this bishop pinning the f pawn to the king. So actually, the only decent move for black in this position is d5 to block that pin. But the problem is the queen can now drop back to g3. So now we can go queen d6 with the idea of trying to block any attack with the queen on g6. This is quite complex, but it's just so then a knight can go here to try and stop that. Okay, and I mean it's you're trying to sack to get rid of it, but queen comes back. So this would be kind of the best black could hope for, and this sort of line. And if you look at everything at the end of the day, white is a piece up. He's got 3 pieces to black's 2. So this would have been definitely good for white. So yeah, so as I said, king takes g7 is the correct move here. There are other incorrect moves. You don't want to do something like c2. That also doesn't work because the bishop can then escape. And okay, you win this, but now your king's all open. And okay, you can look at this position. You've lost an exchange, but basically, white's So one way of you could just take the exchange. There are actually even better moves not taking the exchange for white. So this is all very comfortable for white if black makes the mistake of going c2. This idea of queen h5 stops the rook from ever moving because of queen takes pawn, and so you can take the rook in your own time. I mean, you get a line like this, but and now you're threatening mate here, and so there are positions like this. Okay, so you got at the end of the day, you've got 2 rooks and a bishop against a rook, knight, and a bishop. So again, white is better, slightly better. Okay, so the correct move in this position is king takes g7, and although the king is exposed, the white can take this. I mean, yeah, you've just won it. You've let's see. what's the position like now? So just trying to remind myself how we got here. So we lost the knight. Yeah, that was a mistake. You have to take back the bishop here. Yeah, so this 1, 2. What's the material count like? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So material count is equal. So you might say this is not so good for black, and you'd be right. The black king is very open, but actually it's not. There are no devastating threats immediately, and black can defend. So black can develop in time to defend everything. So stuff like this, it's fine. If white goes bishop d3, bring the queen in. Yeah, so black's the idea in these sorts of positions is exchange off queens, try and simplify, and everything should be fine. So that's what black ideally should have played, but went for something more adventurous, which is not correct because of this queen move. But white made a mistake and didn't play that move, queen to e5, which actually hands black the advantage. So in the end, it's black who gets the advantage at the end of all this opening battle. Up a piece. So yeah, so up a piece, but white, but the black king is quite open. So, but there's no real attack on it yet. So white's only hope in this is to create complications, to try and maybe swing rooks over to attack the black king, and he's got a very, this bishop is a very annoying bishop. He's got this diagonal is also open. So there are lots of ideas in this position. Okay, so what did black do in this position? So he did c6. So this is a nice move. It's blocking the dark square diagonal. Although it's ceding the light square diagonal, it's blocking the dark square diagonal. It's discouraging any knight moves or pawn moves. I mean, they can come anyway at some point, but it's just trying to create some kind of defense so then you can drop the king back and you're defended. So no, it wasn't that at all. It was c6. Whoa. No, it was a much better move. So c6, the idea is you're going to block the light square diagonal. Yeah. I was confused a second. So f6 wouldn't be so good, would it? Yeah, so the battle for d5. So queen c3 check. Okay, then f6 happened. And white tries to blow open the black king. So this is good play. Okay, d5. So this is a very sort of, this is basically exactly what black wants to do, this move of blocking off the dark square diagonal. There's only one problem, is because white has played e5, obviously this pawn can be taken en passant. And white didn't actually do that in the game, and I think it would have been slightly better for AvocadoPost to blow up and to try and open up some lines, because if you take that, you're opening up the bishop diagonal, you're opening up the rook files. So, and white has it's a piece down, but has a slight development advantage to be able to get active quickly. If black could take back, so I mean this is an example line. So queen takes d6, rook f to e1. So why rook f to e1? This is a battle over light squares. Black would love to go bishop e6, swap off this annoying bishop, and the the other bishop defends the knights. That's all good. So rook to e1 be a move just we want to focus our forces on the light squares as white, because that's where the weaknesses lie. Okay, again, knight to e5, knight to d5 to block off. Again, we're very focusing on trying to control squares in our position and then be able to get our king safe. And so doubling up. So it's just a battle over these. So this would be a kind of example line of how white might go for an attack and how black might play. Now, in this position, okay, so obviously black is doing fine, and say a move like king h8 in this position, black is completely fine. But to show you, give you an illustration of the dangers of this kind of position, suppose black were to move, say, b5. Now you can already see how this is going to be dangerous, because this pawn is a bit overworked. It's both defending this square, and there's a lot of pieces ganging up on these light squares. So a move like b5, which might seem just natural, just kick the bishop away, on the face of it, this seems like a very natural move. But it immediately runs into tactics. So it's in fact, so queen g3 check. So I just want to just show you some cool lines. It's looking into here. There's a lot of open lines for white's pieces. Okay, so a piece down, but a lot of open lines. And after playing this move b5 in this sort of just example variation, white would actually be at least equal because his pieces are more active. So if, for example, the king goes to f7, there's a crazy sack you can do. Rook takes. Bishop, the knight can't take back because it's pinned, so you'd have to take back either with the king or with the queen. If you take back with the queen, we've got knight takes pawn coming in. So you see how just a move like d5, you've just weakened that square. So suppose you took back with the king, but then we have the queen invading. Well, okay, so you could have the queen invading. If the king keeps repeating going to dark squares, we could get a repetition. Suppose it goes to d7, we have another interesting sack. If the pawn can't take this knight, or the rook takes this knight and wins the queen. And this knight is interesting because it's targeting now this c7 square, and the queen could come into c7 and drop some checks here. So black isn't losing in this position, but it turns out that black can't get out of checks, basically. This is just an example. And if black tries to get out of checks doing something like this, there are mating ideas. So the point of these sorts of lines is to show that there is bite in this position. There are chances for white in this position of at least getting a draw, and if black is too ambitious, even getting a win. And so it's really important for black to snuff out those chances. And so I think often in games when one side is losing, even just a piece down, especially if the position looks peaceful for a moment and you've been trying really hard in a game and then you suddenly lose a piece, often the player who's lost the piece feels a lot discouraged a lot and might even resign that position just because they're down the piece, they've been trying to maintain equality, and suddenly they realize they're losing and they resign. But it's always worthwhile in a position to say, where are my chances in this position? For example, do I have a chance of a passed pawn? It may be a small chance, but you have to just play for the ideas that you have in the position. Play for the things which are in your favour. I might be completely losing on one side of the board, or just lost a pawn, and it's just those positions when you might go, okay, why not go for an attack on the other side of the board, or a kingside attack, or whatever. Where can I find complications? So I usually watch and play Crazy House, and in Crazy House there's a player on Lichess called 12teen from Canada, and one of the qualities 12teen has in Crazy House, and no doubt in chess as well, is even if he's completely losing, he has this idea in his head. How am I going to go about winning this position? How am I going to turn it round? And often he does. Obviously it's a lot easier in Crazy House to turn around lost positions than it is in chess, because you have new pieces coming round that you take. Any piece you take you can put back on the board. And that's what I usually discuss on my stream. So do check out my other videos if you're interested in Crazy House. Okay, but returning to this. So this is all in a sample line. What I was suggesting, this is more dangerous for white because it's opening up more lines. But this is also decent. It's removing the protector of the king. Rook takes is correct because the knight otherwise would be hanging. The bishop now drops back. Okay, so black develops his last piece, which seems reasonable, and then rook b to d1. And actually, so now, if you look at the engine quite likes rook to b to d1. It seems like a perfectly decent move. It's developing your rook, it's putting it on a central file. But but somehow it feels wrong to me for the following reasons. You can't lift that rook for any attack because the bishop's covering that square. And the bishop, you can kick the bishop, but the bishop's probably going to drop back and try and defend the king. I think the key in this position for white is the e-file. And white must have been thinking, oh, it's okay, I'm just going to move the other rook to the e-file, and it looks good. Move this rook to d1, move this rook to e1. And it's true, this is a pretty picture if you were in an even position, but this is not an even position. This is a position where white has to be very dynamic in creating chances for himself. So although the engine doesn't quite like rook to d1, I think rook b to e1 is much more exciting, and you have to play. I mean, there's nothing immediate. But you're just controlling more squares more quickly, and you'll see from later in the game. Yeah, why to e1 might not be as good. The other thing is it allows this bishop pin. Okay, it didn't happen in the game, but it's just another idea that why it might not be as good. So remember, white. All black wants to do in this position is simplify, exchange off queens, and get his king safe. So white wants complications. So rook f to e1 is good, rook to g8. But instead, black did what is actually quite exciting. So this is why this is one of the games that's been chosen. Is black's not quite satisfied with just trying to simplify. Black wanted to launch some kind of counter-offensive of his own on the white king, double up the rooks on the g file and go for something. You could even go for this. It's quite easy for white to evade. I mean, it's black's king in danger here, not white. So it's a little bit cheeky from black, but a very dynamic and exciting way of playing from black. So kudos, going rook to g8. But in terms of strategy for winning the game, I think bishop g4 would have been very nice, a very nice move, because you've got now two pieces attacking this. You're threatening to open up the white king, and then you can do moves like rook to g8 and try to mate the white king. And it's quite hard to defend. I mean, so if you don't want your king to be opened up, you'd have to do a move like rook to e3. And then you have moves like queen to c5, and it's just very difficult for white not to exchange off queens. Suppose white goes queen to d2 to avoid the exchange of queens. Takes. Yeah, there's no way of avoiding it while maintaining a protection along this file. That's the point. If you exchange off queens, you're simplifying, and although your advantage might be slightly less, like according to an engine, white has very little chances of winning the game. So so this position, obviously black is very happy. The white king is open, and you're a piece up. You're completely happy. So this would have been the way for black to really finish off this game, I think, and that's why I think another reason why this rook to rook a to d1 was possibly not such a good idea. There's this bishop here, and queen here. You force off the exchange of queens, or else you've got a really nice position. But instead, white, so instead, black goes for an attack of his own. And yeah, we get a very dynamic position because of all these open files, quite dangerous position for both sides. Yeah, this is a very nice move because the knight can't really go anywhere apart from back to here. Although having said that, this is kind of, the knight always wants to reroute itself at some point. But it's a nice move to try and push the knight out of the action, because for a few moves the knight will then be completely out of the game if you want to quickly launch an attack. So this is quite a good move to just... so queen's attacking the rooks double up. It's quite sensible. Okay, the knight gets back in the game. So these are all very, very good moves from both players. b4, knight d7. Yeah, so white was always interested in these light squares, this e6 squares. A weakness. Black's got a nice resource. He can just move his queen, because this pawn is pinned to the king, he can just move his king to f4. And so activating the queen in a way. Rook d to e1. Now here there's a quite hard move, to be honest, to find. Knight to e5. I mean, it's a very interesting move because you're disconnecting the rooks from each other. So you can later try and exchange off queens, maybe. You can see. You're also threatening knight here check, winning the rook. That's the immediate threat. And so how does white avoid it? I mean, so there are several ways white could try and avoid it, like maybe move the king or bishop to d1. Bishop to d1 is quite good because it's also threatening bishop takes pawn, and that would open up a line of attack on the black king. So pushing, because it can't be taken, trying to get out of the pin would be a sensible thing to do. And there are loads of ideas for both sides in this position. So knight e5 is quite a complex move, and so one idea is going. So this is a very nice move, queen to d4. So the plan is to take this pawn and mate on f2. The plan might also be to reroute your knight to here and here. The pawn can never take because of the rook going to the back rank and mating ideas here. Hi there, Bakus. Welcome. This h file is going to open up, and the rook's going to be on the h file trying to mate the white king. And finally, another weird idea in this position is this rook is disconnected from its protector. So if the queen can be driven back, or you could go here, for example, and you're effectively forking the queen and rook and forcing a queen trade. So there are lots and lots of ideas in this position, and this would be an example of how a line might continue. Your aim is to double up the rooks. So knight here attacking the rook, you lose that rook, check. Yeah, this is very interesting, because if you were to take that, if you take that rook, there's check here, and you can't take that the rook because of queen here checkmate. So you end up losing all your material if you take the rook. And if you don't take the rook, you're still in trouble because I'm now doubling up on this h file. The rook is coming in and mating. So this is just they're very dynamic ideas associated with moving the knight to e5. This isn't what happened in the game, but it was a very cool idea. But remember, black doesn't need to do cool ideas. Black just needs to simplify. So what black did is perfectly decent. King to f1, trying to get out of the pin, check, rook block, h4. And this is just, again, if you take that pawn, rook here is checkmate. So it's a very nice looking move, although it does give white some counterplay with the move f4, which it's quite a hard move to find, because this is the sort of move that will either lose the game immediately for you or kind of give you fresh hope of winning the game. And why is it so dangerous? If you do a move like this, okay, so if the rook doesn't have that many places to go, is the first thing. If you go, for example, here, there are weird tactics like trying to take the bishop, and if you take back with the rook, this rook falls. And there are weird counter tactics from black of going, okay, no problem, I'm going to sacrifice my rook and then take this, and this rook is pinned. So hang on a second. Takes. What do we do here? If oh yes, queen takes rook, and the queen actually defends e2. So I was told that Lichess would be featuring this stream, the league review. So we'll see if they do. I think the title's all fine. It's yeah, I'm sure it is. Okay. So it was certainly featured earlier. So I don't know if it's been unfeatured, but yeah. So rook. So this is nice. Okay, so there is this idea of f4, which is very interesting. So I mean, if we look more deeper in these lines, so it's quite complex. So yeah, so you have to take here. Okay, so the best move for white here is actually bishop here. And the idea is to, at some point to take this pawn and try and get some checks on the black king on the back rank. Check. I mean, so you can see this is very... So the king has to come here to defend this pawn. If you go to here, then you've got queen takes pawn check and white's in trouble. And in this sort of position, yeah, it's quite difficult. Black can keep on checking, but can't really make progress, actually, quite strangely. So although the black king is on the back rank, it's quite difficult to make progress. If the black queen ever goes off and chasing, say, pawns on this side of the board, you can take this pawn and start checking yourself. So one interesting idea black could have in this position, I know this is going a little bit away from the game, is d4, going for a mate, because you're cutting off the king's escape route. And so if in this position white were to make the mistake of taking this pawn, obviously you have queen here check, rook here check, revealed, and then checkmate. So you're kind of... But obviously white wouldn't be foolish enough to take the pawn. White would just do some other move. So, but there are traps, is the point. But actually, in this position, I think it'd be very hard for black to win if he plays this accurately. But it's quite complicated. I mean, f4, the rook could also go here, and then it's again this, and then white actually has this g4 move. So and this is supposed to be equal apparently. So, or even good for white. So, but I think equal is queen to e3, sort of ideas like this. And yeah, in this position, white is actually doing okay. So white did have this weird chance with f4 to get back in the game, despite being a piece down. So therefore, in retrospect, maybe this pawn push wasn't such a good idea. And as I said earlier in the stream, this whole approach by black of really going for white and trying to mate him effectively, while nice, is a little bit dangerous. If your king is so open, it's a little bit dangerous to be trying to mate your opponent's king, because you are the one who might get mated. But it makes for an exciting game, so kudos to both players. So rook e3 tries to exchange off queens, which would completely solidify the game for black. And look at this, the white queen kind of penned into the corner because he didn't want to exchange. Okay, so he doubles up on another file. So it's quite a cute move. Now, remember, black just wants to simplify. He's given up on the mating ideas, just trying to simplify. And check. And note, this is a nice, just wins 2 rooks for the queen. And because black's pieces are so much better coordinated than white, all white's pawns are falling, and white can't do anything to protect them. And at this point, after a few more moves, white resigned because we have just a pawn storm of black pawns which will be coming down the board. Okay, so now we move on to, yeah, very nice play from both players. I mean, I can run through the whole game for those just joining us. So it's a quite unusual Scotch Gambit variation, and it looks as if black's in trouble, but this is actually all theory in a weird way. But black has to play king takes bishop in this position. Black is still in a little bit of trouble, but it's okay. Instead, black played this move, which is a mistake, because white can go to e5 and protect his bishop, and it's got a huge attack. But instead this happened, and it's actually black who ends up a piece up out of the opening. Okay, nice move, because we're a piece up, we just need to control all the files. If you can control the files, again, white should probably have taken en passant to open up as many diagonals and files as possible. It's still an advantage to black, but just more opportunities. The white pieces are quite dynamic, but a whole piece is a bit too much. Has to take with the rook because of the knight being en prise. And in this position I was saying black, I didn't like rook to here because it felt not quite dynamic enough. I preferred both rooks teaming up on the open file. And in this position, I think black had a way of finishing the game off quickly by pinning this knight and getting an exchange of queens. But instead goes for something much more dynamic, making an even more exciting game, and possibly giving white one final chance of equalizing in this position by playing f4, and it would have been a very crazy position. But f4 is a really tough move to find, opening up your king. And white didn't find it, and so just trying to avoid the exchange of queens and can't avoid it. And in the end, black's desperate to give up his queen, gives it up for 2 rooks. And yeah, it was a fantastic game and a great one to review for the Lichess 45-45 League. So congratulations to both players. Another game, I just wanted to mention this game as well. It was another board 4 game, and I wanted to mention it because kudos to both players for Delpire as white against RealRobbert as black, and I feel both players really did a lot of work. Hi there, RealRobbert in the chat. I think both players did a lot of work, prepping the opening, trying to understand. So it was, I think RealRobbert had recently started playing the French defence, and Delpire was saying in the chat that he'd really studied how to play against the French defence in quite some depth, and so it proved with both players going into a mainline French defence. And so I won't. Like in the first game, I explained the variations of the Scotch. I'm not going to go into explaining the variations of the French defence, even though I play it myself as black. But just to mention, in this position, you quite often see the move bishop d3 at the club level because they're hoping for a little trap, which is takes, and oops, you've just lost your queen. So the discovery. Of course, these players are not going to fall for that, but there's also an interesting line here where obviously you don't take it, but you go bishop d7. So you guard against the trap. And I was just saying how in the Scotch game there's a very cool video by Jonathan Schrantz on the St. Louis Chess Club site on YouTube. But there's also a very nice YouTube video by him on the Milner-Barry Gambit. And the Milner-Barry Gambit is when white goes castles and lets black take this pawn. And if see you later, Stiley. I will indeed. I will indeed. Yes. If you just keep the stream open, I'll do it when I'm slightly paused. Or if someone can type !YouTube, that will do it. Okay. So in this position, you allow black to take this pawn, and you actually, even if he wants to, you allow him to take a second pawn, but it's not recommended to take the second pawn, is what I understand, because white can go rook to e1, the queen would have to drop back to b8, and white will definitely win back one of those pawns, but black will be in a very passive position. So that's the Milner-Barry Gambit. If you want to read more about that, check out Jonathan Schrantz videos on St. Louis Chess Club. They're really, really good videos explaining openings for the Scotch game, for the last game, for this as well, the Milner-Barry Gambit. Well, this wasn't the Milner-Barry Gambit played in this game. Both players here went straight down mainline theory. A3. Bishop to d7. It's a very common idea in the French defence is that this light squared bishop is not a good bishop because it's trapped in by the chain of pawns, and it never had an opportunity to get out. So it's a very common idea. You want to get it out to b5 and exchange it off with white's light squared bishop, which is a very good bishop. Also, something worth noting, and it's just true in all games. If you want to see where to attack in a position, look at the direction of your pawns. So you can see just from the direction of the pawns in this position, white is going to have a kingside attack, and black is going to have a queenside attack. It's a kind of rule of thumb. There are exceptions. And in fact, And this is why in the King's Indian, where you have this setup in the center, black will attack on the king side usually, and white on the queen side. And what's quite interesting is note if you look at King's Indian type games where black plays an early c5 move, then it's often in those games that actually black's not so interested in attacking on the king side. He actually wants to do some kind of queenside action because of this in c5 instead of e5. So I just wanted to mention that it's quite, from the pawns you play, you can get a guide or an idea of where you're going to be attacking, or where is probably most profitable to attack. Because where is most profitable to attack is where you can coordinate the maximum number of pieces into your attack. And obviously, if your pawns are facing in this direction, it means there's more space on this side of the board in order to coordinate your pieces to launch attacks on a very precise point. So that's just, I should just mention that as a general rule of thumb. I think it's worthwhile. Okay, but in this position, black's hoping just to exchange his bad bishop for white's good bishop. Very nice. White plays b4, takes. Okay, and knight g to e7, knight c3, and I think this is just excellent preparation from both players. And maybe at this point they're outside book, but they're still following book. So this is very nice. Rerouting the knight to f5 is a very common idea in the French, because you want to be able to get your bishop out, and this knight on f5 is a good piece targeting d4. And this looks a little bit scary because you've got 3 pieces targeting d4 but only 2 defenders. But white has a very nice way of defending it, and this is actually, since we're talking about general principles, a very nice general principle. If you can't defend something, counterattack. And that's what white has to do in this position. And that's a general principle in a lot of situations. If you are, so often if someone attacks you, you should defend against that attack. But you should always have in the back of your mind, either if you can't defend against it, or if you have a stronger counterattack than his attack. If someone attacks you, you don't have to defend. You could also attack him back on some other part of the board. It's a sort of general strategy. So knight a4, so this attacks the queen. So it's a very good defense for d4. The queen drops back. And now you can defend the pawn with the bishop. Okay, so now you've got 3 defenders of that pawn. It's all good. And a6. Okay, so, and this is apparently, we're still following games which have been played at the Masters level, but having said that, a6 is a little bit concerning because it does weaken the dark squares around black's queen side. So, I mean, I think maybe slightly better for black would be bishop e7. And, okay, I can see why black played a6. So it's not necessarily because he's worried about bishop to g5, for example. But maybe he's worried about b5, kicking that knight. But remember, white shouldn't really be attacking on the queen side. I mean, he can, for sure, he's free to attack wherever he likes, but that's kind of going to be, black's going to be very happy with any attack on the queen side. He's got the pieces on the queen side to handle it, and he can coordinate his pieces to handle it. So although white can play b5 and it could be a bit annoying, let me just show you an example. I mean, this is just a sample line. b5, okay, you can just move the knight out the way. Rook to c1 attacking the queen, okay, a little bit annoying, but we could just move the knight. And I think we're not in book anymore. This is just a kind of sample of what black was worried about, and I think black shouldn't be worried about it. Knight to c3, yeah, just target this pawn. Okay, white really doesn't have any future in any queenside attack, but white does have a dangerous attack down the center, because this would threaten this. If you take this pawn, let me see. If you take this pawn, what's the... maybe that would be a bit dangerous. Let me see. Is that dangerous? So taking the pawn is maybe also possible. It's not... So taking the pawn is possible, or just simply moving the queen out of the way. So this is just... yeah, this is more like sample lines. Actually, moving the queen out of the way, it looks very crazy because you're leaving a pawn on d6. Yeah, and white could go here, both targeting this pawn, and black can't take this pawn, or white takes the queen. And this is just a sort of sample line. But actually quite interesting in this position is black can say, okay, I'll take that pawn anyway, you take my rook. Because at the end of the day, white's queen would be trapped in this position. There's no way of the black queen getting out. Maybe there is a way of it getting out eventually, but it's so this would be a very dynamic and interesting position. Does white have anything better? Because what black is doing in this position is he's taking this pawn, and these pawns are. So although this pawn looks very dangerous, this pawn is also very dangerous. But I think the point of this, of course, in this position, black could just take the pawn directly, and it's would be fairly equal, I guess. But I guess the point of this is just to say that b5 is a risk, but it's not the end of the world. But anyway, even the masters play a6, some of them. So rook c1, very good move, pinning the knight to the queen. B5, and again, I don't like this move b5. Okay, it makes sense because you're creating. Okay, you're controlling this square, and you're just pushing back against any advance of white's pawns along here. But it's just giving the dark squares to white. So it's allowing the knight just to post up on this beautiful outpost on c5. Black hasn't got the similar outpost. Yes, okay, so Stiley is spot on. In this position, I meant to say this and I forgot to. Instead of going bishop to d7, which is a very nice idea, I think, yeah, c4 is slightly stronger. And the idea is c4 in this position, because white's gone a3, c4 clamps down on white's light squares. So what's black's idea in this position? His idea is to go knight a5, guarding this square. The queen's on this square. If black plays something like knight b to d2, okay, you go knight a5, bishop e2. Now what's the other idea I had in this position? Yes. Yeah, so it's just something like this. So you're developing the knight here. So yeah, this is very decent. And it's basically very difficult. Yeah. After bishop to b2, it looks like the Polish. Interesting. Yeah. So I'm not familiar, so that's interesting. But okay, so I think so. You're right. C4 is maybe a better move for black, but this is what black played is also playable. But I don't like the a6 b5 push. Actually, if anything, a6 b6 to control this square, and move the queen out of the way and bring the rook to the c file. I think that's very playable. Or bishop e7 is also nice. Bishop to d3, castles. So this sort of stuff could have been played, but there's actually a move that's never been played in this position, which is h4. But I think it's quite so this is like the opening novelty that's never been played at the Masters level. So that's it. That's the opening novelty for today. Because you have to be a little bit concerned about the white's pieces just launching a huge kingside attack. Probably black would play something like f6, g4, and it's just going to be a huge attack on the black king. It's not necessarily winning, but this is certainly pleasant, but also double-edged for white to play. So that would have been, without going b5, just bishop d7 castling would have been, I think, slightly better. So b5, as I said, it does weaken the dark squares, and Delpire went straight in. He likes it. He liked that square for his knight outpost. He likes that square now for his rook outpost, and this is very nice. Very nice play from white. Okay, black I think is still okay. So then knight f to e7. So at some point, yeah, he's castled into a potential attack, which is so it's something to be slightly concerned about. He's got to get the queen out of the way of. So maybe ideas like, I'm trying to work out. I can't say exactly what. At some point, he has to try and sort out Okay, what he did is, here is the problem, because this knight can be taken, and although it doubles your pawns, that's not a problem in the French. And it's possible, RealRobbert saw the thought of his pawns being f pawns being doubled and didn't like that idea. It's not a problem. Just take the queen out of the way, let your pawns be doubled. It's not pretty, but it's actually the bishop can become a giant pawn on e6, and actually, okay, I'm not saying this is better for black or even equal for black, but it's definitely playable, and it's quite hard for white to break through. But going knight f to e7, it does open up this attack, which happened in the game. A very nice attack. If you don't take the bishop, you've just lost a pawn. If you do take the bishop, knight g5. If the king goes back to g8, you have the queen coming in. It's not mating immediately because the rook can kind of make some space. If the queen goes here, the knight can block. So the queen could go here, and then so the queen and knight alone can't quite checkmate, because you go queen here, king here, queen here, king here, queen here, check. The knight can block. Queen and knight alone can't quite checkmate, but you just bring one more piece into the attack, and black has got 0 defenders. So something like this would be the best hope. So, and it is actually quite a common thing. And the knight on f5, you do often just let it, just allow it to be taken. So queen d8, bishop takes knight, pawn takes. So something like this. Okay, if I were to ask, so in this position, that's not good because you're losing this pawn, which is kind of awkward. But it's not that bad. I mean, if I ask the engine, it says plus 0.6 in this position. So I'll just turn the engine off again. Plus 0.6. So yeah, white does have an advantage, but it's actually okay for black to play. And in general, white would not have a rook on c5 with that threat. So usually, if this does ever happen to you, get the bishop to e6 as quickly as possible. I know it's not pretty having a bishop as a giant pawn, but it's very safe. Okay, so what happened in the game is very interesting, which is a sack. And if the king runs back, as I said, this is just getting yourself mated. Queen here check, and then getting the rook over, checkmate. So it's a very pretty mate. So of course what anyone would do in this position is you run the king forwards. And what the beauty of this knight is that it's preventing the king from running back. So we're going to see another example of this kind of position right at the end, of where the king is trapped in the center of the board, how to play as white. Okay, so the usual principle in these sorts of situations is you defend this knight. Because you defend this knight, that means the king is going to stay trapped in the center of the board. And so almost always in these positions, the move to play is queen to g4, because you're threatening a discovery, and what can black do? I mean, black can't run out of the discovery. So if black, say, tried to run out of the discovery, you've got check, check, takes the knight, check here, maybe. Let me see, maybe I got this wrong. Maybe here, check. Okay, let's see. Okay, maybe it is here, so check. You're running the king right in the center of the board, so there should be trouble coming. Oh yes, this one, check. This check, now you've got the two diagonals of the bishop and queen working together. No pieces around the black king. This is over. Pawn here, check, or queen here, checkmate. Okay, so this is why this is in this sort of position, black should always run the king forward, and in this sort of position, white, as a general principle, would always go queen to g4. Well, as we'll see, that actually isn't the best move in this position, which is surprising to me, because queen to g4 is always the right move. But also, always the right move after queen to g4 is black really needs to create an escape. So what black would almost always want to do in this position is to attack the queen. because whenever you've got a discovery on your king, you don't want to attack the piece that's going to be moved to discover. You want to attack the piece that's going to give the discovered check. Because if you attack that piece when the discovered check comes, you can just take the piece. So a very good move in this position, you would think, would be f5. And that was the move that RealRobbert played. But again, this position is very counterintuitive, because it turns out, I would play f5. It turns out f6 is actually stronger. And the reason is because and this is almost never the case. As I said, general rule is the queen should go to g4. General rule is you attack the piece that's going to discover check on you. Okay, so we'll go back to the queen to g4 in a second, but the reason is because after the discovered check, you're hoping to take the queen, but the problem is your own queen is pinned. So the king would run back to f7. Okay, you take the queen, but you lose your own queen. Okay, you win in exchange, but you just sacked a piece earlier. So after all that, you're not really winning. It's kind of, it's kind of pretty unclear. Which is a bit disappointing if you just thought I had a powerful mating attack. So f6 is the move. There's no the discovery doesn't work, and if you take f6, king can take to get out of the discovered check. And again, why isn't black in huge trouble? So let's just do some sample moves. If I did rook here, I think knight here would probably be fine, and then the king could run back. Just check quickly. Yeah, turn on the engine. Yep, that's completely fine. Maybe black even has it. Let's see if black had any better moves. Yeah, so apparently in this position, rook to h8 is an even better move. But just the very human knight here, run the king back, perfectly okay for black. Not winning by any means, but not losing either. Oh, that's what the problem was. Yes, that was not smart of me. Knight here, there is knight here check. So you're losing the exchange, yes. Okay, so that's not ideal. So that's why you want to run the rook to h8. Thank you, Obi. Yeah, so f5 is not the best move. f6, curiously, is the best move. Because of this, you run your king to safety. And that's very surprising. And also surprising is that queen to g4 is not the best move. Okay, so what could be the best move? Maybe it's some move that defends the knight, you might think. Like, what if I did this? So the knight is cutting off the king. Surely you want to defend that knight. But then black could maybe attack the knight, and then you could maybe give a check, and black has to block the check. Can't block it with the pawn, because the whole point is black is trying to take this knight and get back to safety as quickly as possible. And then white might have h5 check. And worth bearing in mind, you don't want to take that knight. If you took that knight, then there's bishop here check. You can't run back, you can't block. You're getting mated. Queen here is checkmate. So you definitely don't want to take the knight, but you could just run to here, to h6 maybe. And the knight's under attack, so the knight runs away. But now you can take this pawn and maybe run back to safety. Run back to safety, and okay, white can try and start a new attack, but you've kind of got away. So white can do something like this. Okay, so white actually may still be winning in this position, and maybe black they weren't the best moves by, let me see, g4. Maybe king to g8 is not the best move in this position. Maybe bringing the queen in is better. But the point is, that, so this would have been another approach from white. You want to defend that piece and then want to move in. Okay. It turns out that wasn't the best move either. So it's not queen to g4, and it's not h4. Is it bishop to f1 maybe? Bringing the bishop into the attack. That seems like a... bishop to c1, I should say. That seems like a reasonable move. Again, that doesn't really work because of f6, and you get very similar lines to what we just discussed when you push the pawn, except you don't have this h4 followed by h5 check. So it's pretty hard to spot the best move for white in this position, and neither player did spot it. it's a hard one. Queen to d3 check. But again, it's very understandable that the king can't take the knight, or the king will be stranded in the middle of the board, and actually the king will get mated in. A very similar pattern to what we saw earlier. King goes here, queen comes behind, driving the king even further forward, and just a pawn is checkmating, or bringing the queen here is checkmating. So the king can't take the knight. So we have to block this check, either with a pawn or with the knight. If we block with the knight, then we're just immediately going to get pinned, and this is going to get ugly quite quickly. So definitely blocking with the pawn is a better idea, but this is still very powerful for white. h4, h5. By blocking with the pawn, you've lost the possibility of f6 to try and kick that knight away. So h4, h5 is coming. It's this may even be forced mate coming. Bishop to c1. The idea is of eventually doing a discovery knight. Maybe first going queen to g3, then doing a discover check and going queen takes g7 checkmate. So basically, black's king is kind of stranded with no pieces around it, and black's best hope is this kind of weird sack, knight takes pawn, which you don't want to take, otherwise queen takes pawn with check. So white's best move is knight here, check, and takes the knight. Okay, so that's a way for black to avoid mate. If black doesn't find that, black's in really some serious trouble. So it's so quite strange in this position. Queen to d3 was the move. Queen to d3 check. But we saw some of the other moves. Okay, instead what was played is queen to g4, which is a very nice looking move. f5, and again f6 is better, but it's for very very specific reasons to this position of none of the discovery is working. So f5 is a very natural move. Queen drops back, and black, desperate to get out of the pin, goes to h6. And probably better was f4, queen to g4. This is quite an interesting position. There's no knockout blow for white here, but it is going to be losing. The bishop's going to come round, the pawn is going to be pushed. There's no moving this knight, and this knight is going to keep this king trapped in the middle of the board until white can coordinate his pieces and bring them finally round to deliver checkmate. There's no like mate in 20 or something, but there's no defense, let's say. But okay, so that would be like the best defense is f4, but black played this, and that should have led to the similar mate that we saw earlier. King takes knight, and then the bishop with queen here, checkmate. But white played another very strong move, which was f4, just simply cementing that knight in place and threatening queen here and queen here, checkmate. And in this position, black resigned, although I mean there is no hope for black in this position. It's again, the mate will be coming. The best defense is rook h8 to guard this h7 square, but then you have stuff like this, winning a rook, maybe queen to h4. I mean, there's nothing completely. You can take this knight, so that would be maybe a nice continuation. And if the knight takes the queen, you're winning a queen. So you're at least a piece up, and certainly this is a win for white. But actually, it was maybe something RealRobbert could have played on a few moves just to see if white could finish the job, because white did miss the mate, did miss a clean finish with f4. So black could have made white try and do the job, but it's a very nasty and hard position for black to play, because whatever moves you do, black is going to it's very hard for black to get his pieces round. This move f4 also cements the e-pawn. There are no ideas of knight takes pawn, pawn takes queen takes pawn, which we saw earlier, which is a nice that was a nice idea if the bishop had moved off this diagonal. So having said that, it's pretty hard for black to defend this. Okay, so that was the second game we wanted to look at. Okay, so now the third game, I'm not going to look at the whole game, but since we were looking at these sorts of sacks on h7, I'm just going to discuss this briefly. It was a board 5 game between colwem as white and kanakaishou as black. Yeah, you're welcome, the RealRobbert. And something philosophical. When do you sack and when do you not sack? And if a pawn is on h7, you have to take that opportunity to sack quickly, because that pawn on h7 could be defended or it could move. There's an urgency. If you're going to do the sack, you better do it quickly. I mean, as we saw in that last position, general rules are broken. There are 2 general rules. Whenever you're in that position, move your queen to g4. It's almost universal you do that move. When you're black in that position, you go f5. Almost always, that is the best move, f5. And yet we saw in that position, you can't follow general rules. You have to look at the specifics of this position. Turns out there was a cleaner move to queen to g4, which is queen d3. But I'm saying even very strong players would have missed that. And f6, again, I'm sure a lot of very strong players, even international masters, would probably have missed that because it's so unnatural. You want to attack the piece that's going to give you a discovery. Yes, so the time control is 45 plus 45. For those who want to join, check out lichess4545.com. I'm going to post the link again later. So we have a very nice position here for white, but notice how the pawn here is on h6. Now what actually happened in the game, I'm not going to run through what happened in the game, but a few moves took place, and then white sacked on h6, but he only got 1 pawn for the sack, when actually in this position a little bit earlier he could have got 2 pawns for the sack. I think he only got 1 pawn for the sack, and he was a piece down, and he somehow didn't have enough pieces to mate the black king, so it was a bit of a disappointing finish for colwem, because he ended up losing a game in which, as you see in this position, white has a really very nice position. So I wanted to just say a few words about how to convert a position like this. You could just go straight for a sack. So I should have said, in this position. So the sack was only worthwhile, potentially, is because black plays f5, and that's severely weakening squares around his king, which made the sack possible. White actually didn't sack immediately. White could have sacked immediately, and this is not like a puzzle, as in it's not this is not winning for white as in the last game. It's not white has enough play to justify this sacrifice. Bringing the knight in, it's about bringing your pieces in, and white is quite happy to sacrifice this rook. Notice, because the light squares are the key to this attack, and if black is going to get rid of his light square defender, the light squares around the black king are going to be very weak. So bishop takes rook, rook takes. You're going to have to defend with rooks, for example. And black seized a lot of material, but white's going to seize back that material very, very quickly. Check, takes. Okay, so at the end of the day, we'd see that knight knight, bishop, rook. No, hang on, so what's going on here? That's not right. What is it? Rook, knight, bishop, so it's a piece. Okay, but white's got a gazillion pawns for that piece. And in particular, 2 pawns on the 5th rank. Okay, so white would be better here. So it's a bit, So it isn't like a direct mating attack or something, but if black does exchange his dark squared bishop, those light squares around the king are very weak, and there are ways for white to regain the material. If he doesn't, he bring a very good move for black is bring another defender and try and defend these light squares. the problem is black's pieces are not quite coordinated nicely. You can win a piece back, and so that there are ways for white to get a slight advantage. If white just did nothing, just did a6, that's not a completely stupid move, by the way, because the idea is rook a7 and give you lateral defense on h7. So a6 is not purely a waiting move. It could be quite a good move. White's got a nice move in this position, pretty hard to find, of g4. Why? Because you want to open up both this diagonal and this rook file. Okay, so these are just ideas in this position. Why is the league 45 plus 45, whereas Lone Wolf is 30 plus 30? I guess because the Lone Wolf is for people who have less time, and the league is for people who are a little bit more committed. And it's easier to be committed when you have a team whom you're fighting for. And by the way, for those interested in Crazy House, which I stream, there will be a Crazy House League set up on the same platform as the Lichess 45. So you have to download Slack on your phone or on your computer, but I think it's the phone is easier. And it's from players who haven't necessarily played that much Crazy House. It'll just give you a couple of slow games of Crazy House every week with other players of similar ability. Because if you lose, you'll be playing other players who've lost. If you win, you'll be playing other players who win. So that will be starting next week. So if you're interested, do go over to Slack and sign up for a Crazy House League, which is just starting up next week. And if you need to late join, you can join in week 2 as well, or later, because it's just something very informal, just starting up. 2 games of 10 plus 10 every week against the same person. Okay, so this is we saw a6. Okay, so if a6 again with this g4 idea, and you're prepared to sack, and there's just no way of stopping this attack. Okay, so probably the best defense here was, yeah, I'm not sure what the best defense is, but the point is, yes, this sacrifice is justified. Is the point of that? But unlike in the last game, where that pawn had to be taken immediately, or else there was no way of making progress, there is a danger that white does this sacrifice and doesn't have enough pieces to follow up the attack. And there's no way of... It's pretty hard, actually, for black to defend any sacrifice here. So I think even better than sacrificing directly is bringing another piece into the attack. So after f5, knight to d2. And just to show you quickly this sort of line, okay, the disadvantage of bringing another piece into the attack is black is going to bring another piece into the defense. But the question is my knight here better than this knight here? And I think it is, and we'll just see. And so if you're trying to make these decisions, it is very difficult to make, and you have to just try and calculate the lines and try and estimate. Okay, as black, if you want to bring your queen in and exchange off queens, that's a really nice general principle in any such position. If you've just been sacked on, so you're a piece up, you want to exchange off the queens to neutralize the attack. So hi there, guys joining Oddskill and Chess Guy. But that knight moving in stops the queens. Yeah, and the bishop's going to be a threatening mate here. The knight can come in to defend the mate. Okay, so why do I think white's attack is really nice here? It's not that white necessarily has got... It's not like in the last game which we looked at, where white had so many attackers and black had no defenders around the black king. Actually, black's got quite a lot of defenders around his king, but the problem is they're all not very well coordinated. Whereas this feels like it's really beautifully coordinated. Everything's very... It's nicely focused. You could have this knight coming in, targeting h7, this knight targeting g6, targeting the bishop, taking off this bishop. White's pieces are beautifully coordinated in this position. So I think the move knight to d2 here might even be better than going for the sacrifice directly, simply because that pawn's not running away anywhere. We can do the sacrifice whenever we like. Let's get ready for it. And I think this is sometimes you don't have time to get ready, but if you have time to get ready for a sacrifice, then it's even more powerful. And it requires a calculation. Is it going to work? And yeah, I think this is very nice. And although I'm not convinced like what exactly the continuation is. And I was just saying this is actually quite an interesting position. And one dilemma in this position is, do you play the move e5, so springing another attacker in a way into the attack, and it's kicking black's best defender. But I'm slightly worried about knight here. Is that a worry? But the problem with this move is it blocks off the white bishop. So I think it's a sort of dilemma. Do you knight g4 and then what? Queen g5 check. And we're winning this piece, I think, is the problem. Knight to knight to h5. So it may be worthwhile blocking off your own beautiful bishop, just because you're winning that piece, and you have enough compensation. You could even just run back here. And so the dilemma is: do you do that, or do you try and keep the attack going in some way? Okay, it's very difficult to judge that, and you just have to do your best in this situation. But yeah, I think this is a nice way. Knight takes e6, queen g6 perhaps. What about just knight takes e6 here? So after knight f4, knight f6, knight takes e6 here. Okay. Okay, but the knight was stopping the queen coming into g6. So yeah, I think this is nice, but there will probably be an exchange of queens. Queen takes g6, bishop takes g6, and then cash in. I'm guessing cashing in. Rook takes, rook takes. So at the end of the day, and we could take this and swap things off. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're 2 pawns up. 4 and so 2 pawns and a rook for 2 pieces. So we have 2 pawns and a rook for 2 pieces. Yeah, it's a slight advantage. So yeah, if people in the chat can keep us updated on the football, that would be great. So if you just post what the score is, rather than just saying goal, because I don't know who scored. Okay, so yeah, knight takes e6 is okay, and it gives you a slight advantage. e5 is interesting, but it's double-edged, and yeah. So I think this is an interesting kind of, I call this an analysis run because it's not a puzzle as such, but it's a position I think that you can learn from by trying to analyze and consider the different possibilities. Okay, so that's what happened on analysis run from board 5. Now let's actually look at a game from board 5. It was a London system, and in this game, it's Doses 7781 against flgoyens, and Doses 7781 isn't high rated, but he is a dangerous player, and I know that from my own experience, because I've played a game which I wasn't playing badly at all, and got myself into trouble against him. So in this game, he plays a very safe setup. This sort of e3 c3 structure. So it's not sort of it's not taking risks, but it's not opening yourself up to huge tactics. And we'll see in this game, black is the one full of ideas in this game. But whenever you have an idea of a tactic, you really need to just double check that it works. And we'll see in this game, it's quite a nice game, but black was full of ideas, but the ideas all didn't quite work out as it turned out. And then at the end of the day, it should have been a draw, but we'll see endgame technique also played a role in this game. So far this is all very nice. So you take the bishop outside of the pawn chain is a very good idea. The only reason for having it inside the pawn chain is if you're worried about a pin on your king, but the queen is doing a good job defending against that. The only other reason for picking it out inside is if you want to do some kind of exchange of light squared bishops, which would be reasonable as well. the queen is looking a little bit silly on c1, but it needs to do guard duty on b2. So unless that weakness is sorted out, the queen is in a bit of a silly place. So black's played pretty decently here, I feel. And knight e5 is the first deviation from theory, as in from what anyone else has ever played. It's not a bad move, but it's just not... it doesn't accomplish anything. It's possible just to exchange off those pieces and go knight d7. Eventually black might go bishop to d6 and exchange off bishops. So this is not a very... I think black has at least gained equality, let's say, in this position. But he didn't exchange off knights, which he could have done. But it's still perfectly decent moves. So very, very kind of defensive. Oh, yeah, the idea of this actually is very, very sensible. He has a pin on this queen. He wants to unleash. Takes, but in order to do that, the rook has to be defended. So he goes rook to c7. He could have gone castles and defended like this. Okay, rook to c7, perfectly reasonable move. Okay, d takes c5 to stop those ideas. Queen takes pawn. Knight d3, attacking the queen. The queen drops back. So as I said, nothing sensational happening. Knight f4. But black was determined to make something of this pin. So actually, let's see. I mean, yeah, this knight f4 move looks very decent, but actually it allows a force of the exchange of bishops. So this would have been a nice tactic for black to play. If the bishop drops back, you have a fork. So the bishop is forced to take the knight. So this is so knight f4 is a very tiny, tiny, tiny error. But black had other interesting ideas, and that's one of exchanging this central pawn for one of these pawns and going knight takes and getting, and you can't take back with this pawn because of a pin on the queen. So this move isn't really good. Firstly, you're giving away your central pawn. Like, even if this did work, you're giving away your central pawn. That's not a good. It's not really a good exchange. It's a nice idea, playing on the fact you have this pin, but you've got to be careful. And it turns out white can break the pin with an intermediate move. So whenever you're trying out tactics, you have to be really wary of intermediate moves. And something to keep in mind is intermediate moves which are check, or intermediate moves which do a counterattack much bigger than your attack. So I wonder if anyone can see a counterattack in this position, which is even bigger than the attack. So I will be providing a link to this study at the end of the stream, but I don't want to give it away before that, by the way, because I want people to... Knight c4, exactly, a counterattack even stronger than the original attack. And white, who is Dosei 7781, kudos to him, he found the move. And that's rather awkward for black, because he has to move the queen. And like, he can't really avoid... Black's pretty lucky, because he can't avoid moving into a discovery, but it turns out white can't really take advantage. White doesn't really have a cool discovery to take advantage of that discovery. So the best white could do was just exchange off that knight for a piece, and then, well, exchange off another piece, and then at the end of the day pick up that free pawn. And before, the queen was defending the rook. The queen's not defending the rook anymore, so knight takes pawn falls for like queen takes rook. So very sensible. Black just doubles up the protection. White has to get out of the way of the threat of knight takes pawn. Doubling up the rooks, bishop d3. So this is all nice stuff. So kind of rather unfortunate for black, he's lost a pawn, but just continuing, both players playing very decent moves. Queen h6. Rook c1. Okay, so white is up a pawn, so very happy to simplify. And in this position, black had a very nice idea. Bishop takes pawn. Wins a pawn, right? Nice tactic, because the queen is pinning that pawn to the queen. Okay, but does that work? I mean, it seems like it does, just winning a pawn. It's actually a little bit tricky to see that it doesn't work. And but Dose 7781, as I said, he's a smart player. He didn't do anything fancy in this game, but he refuted all the fancy footwork that flgoyens tried to put over him. Okay, so he takes the rook. Can you find the move for white in this position? Actually, he didn't find the right move in this position, but yeah. In fact, yeah, in this position he didn't find the right move, but flgoyens didn't find the right continuation either. Bishop takes h7 is what he played, and it doesn't work. So you're hoping for king takes bishop, queen takes bishop, and you get the pawn back. Fine. It doesn't work because queen takes bishop has a mating threat. This is actually what happened in the game. So can you think of a better move for white? And I could flip the board if that's easier. Queen c2. Queen c2 is interesting. The problem is black could just move the knight, and after bishop takes pawn, he could just sorry, he can't move the knight. Queen c2. He could drop the bishop back to protect the knight, and after bishop takes pawn, he could trap the bishop. Something like that. Baku says bishop c2. Very nice move. Because the bishop is under attack, so I'm taking that bishop. Next move. Unless you move it. But I've got a mate threat on the back rank. Okay. But can't I go here to stop the mate threat? So what? Anything white can do in this position? Queen to d7 from Stiley, good spot. And now the knight's... Okay, so the bishop is busy protecting d8, so the bishop can't protect the knight, and the knight's busy protecting this square. So, and the queen is offside. The queen can't like come around suddenly, like come here and protect the knight. And anyway, the queen's got hit. Okay, so that knight is falling because black's going to have to just push a pawn to defend mate, and so white is taking back that piece, and at the end of all that, and is still attacking more pawns and stuff, and yeah, in this position, and white's got the extra piece, so yeah, so this is completely winning for white. So it's a failed tactic if white spots some bishop move. And it's a little bit tricky because, yeah, bishop here, again, you have to spot that you can do this and win the knight. So, but it all started here. Nice tactic. And well, I'll go back to perspective from black because I feel that's more interesting. Okay, so he did this, but unfortunately unfortunately Dose 7781 took that, and he just realized, oh gosh, I've hung a mating threat. So this is one way of defending the mating threat, going king to the corner and planning going like that. This is not good from white. Clearly, if you want to defend a mating threat, you should create luft like this, because at least then your knight is not trapped on the back rank. I mean, the way he did it, queen here, knight here, all white's pieces are terrible in this position. But now in this position, black thought, my bishop's under attack, and if I move it, the queen is coming here and eating up my knight. Or he must have thought something like that. So he tried to go for a tactic. Queen takes pawn, queen takes queen, bishop takes queen, and then I'll be a piece up, right? No. Another failed tactic. So flgoyens, very imaginative, lots of good ideas, but he needs to check alternatives. Yeah. Doesn't g3 drop a piece in this position? Oh yeah, g3 drops a piece. That's true. So that's why he didn't do that. And he was probably worried about the f pawn. So yeah, let's see. Hang on, g3. If you take this piece, then white takes this piece. And threatening queen here, check, winning the knight. Yeah, and then the knight defends. Okay, yeah, so black is winning that. So king h1, yeah, and if you do a move like this, then yeah, queen b1 check is happening anyway, and bishop then defends this square here. Yes. So is there any other better option? Okay, so I mean, I think all options for white are bad. I mean, sure, this drops a piece, but you'll definitely win the piece back. So it's not. I think that's probably better. I mean, I think that's probably better than going knight to b1, but not much better. No, so knight h1 is okay, but it just makes you a little bit passive. But then here, queen takes pawn was a bad move from black, because he should have simply moved the bishop back, either to here to defend the knight, so after queen here check, you move the queen, or to here. And just as a sample, queen could go to d7, but you can just defend the knight. Queen can check and win a pawn, but you're a piece up, you don't mind losing a pawn. So that was a bit of a miss from black, hoping exchange of queens, and black. And so what happened is we enter this endgame in which black has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns, white's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns. It's an equal endgame. Having said that, white is a little bit more passive. You see black's centralized his piece already. So black's doing really nicely here. And notice also, black has got the outside pawns. So if anyone's got an advantage here, it's black with an outside pass pawn. So flgoyens as black is going to create the outside pass pawn. And I think it would have been better to take with the knight to make the outside pass pawn as far away as possible, so that when eventually white coordinates and takes that pawn, he's as far away from the king side as possible, and black can maybe capture a pawn or two on the king side in exchange. As I said, this is still completely drawn. It's very easy for white to just... it's very easy for white to draw this. But knight takes pawn just just increases your chances a tiny bit. So we get this sort of position. Black's not making any progress. And in this position, maybe he was thinking, we'll exchange off, we'll allow this, because in this position, yeah, but white can still come back in time. I mean, so yeah, white can still come back in time, and if anything, actually white would be fine here. So I'm not sure about allowing knight takes pawn. Instead, he could have easily protected this pawn. I think, so I'm trying to work out who's winning in this position, or if it's still drawing. King d5, king here. So you still got, so it's 3 pawns against 4. I think white might actually have an advantage. Did I miscount earlier? Yeah, you just lost a pawn here. Yeah, I mean, you could go g4. No, g4. Yeah, g4 is bad, because then white creates an outside pass pawn. That's very important. So you have to use the fact that you're somehow slightly ahead of the white king to try and make some progress. F4 is good. Okay, so this is in my own experience, these pawn endgames can be really tricky because it's very easy to mess them up. I was myself lucky in one game. I made a misstep in a pawn endgame, but my opponent, because I was playing on board 2 in this league in season 12, but my opponent didn't catch it, and I spotted my mistake, and I didn't make the same mistake again, and so was able to draw that game. But yeah, this is a drawn game, but you have to be very careful. Like I said, I made this misstep with G4, and I didn't notice. Oh, your opponent can make a pass pawn on the H file. Be really careful. This looks lost for black. King E5. That is lost with G5. So I'm going to take that out. But in this position, you're threatening to come in and win this pawn. White can't. Yeah. Black can just shuffle here. This position. King E3. I mean, you're actually taking control if you go King E3. If you go King here, so black is actually fine. So hang on. Black is fine, but it's just King here is not winning because then white has King here and has got opposition. So you have to be really careful about the way you play this. Okay, you have to step back, and if white steps forward, you take opposition. The reason why it's winning is because if ever white tries to break, like so. You bring your king closer. If ever white goes for this break, you can take this covers any break, so he has to take back, and you take opposition again. If he pushes, he can't do a breakthrough. If he pushes here, he can't do a breakthrough. If he goes here, you either take like distant opposition, so you have an odd number of squares between your kings. Or you do this move, and if he does this, you can just step back. You got to be careful. You have to be really careful. So if you step back here, you lose because of this. And then if you go here, why is this losing? Because King E5. Why can't I take opposition? Because G5, he's had the spare move, and suddenly white's got opposition. So in this position, you can't go King E5. So you can go King C7, distant opposition, that's fine. So you can go King D5, but what I said is you can't go King D3. Yeah, you can't go King D6 in this position. You have to go King C6, so that when white comes in here, then you go King D6. So that if ever white does this spare move, you then go King D7, so whenever he goes here, you've got opposition. So it is a draw for black, but requires really, really precise play. So I thought it looked like white could play King C5 when black's king was on E5. Exactly. If black moves his king to E5, white can play King C5, and black is busted. And it seemed to me that white would win the pawn race. Correct. Absolutely. So that's why King E5 is a very big blunder. Here, okay, in this position, if C5, this position, yes. So it looks like black's going to win the pawn race, doesn't it? But there's this move, which saves black, because now you have to take this pawn, and this pawn is running just as fast as this one. So you could take, but if you're running this pawn, run. So it's tight, but this is going to be a draw. Yeah, so as you said, and then the key move there was this G5 move. So indeed, that was it was a good spot to go over that. So G5 is key in order to be able to push this pawn. You don't have time to do this. Very good point. I'm very glad I made this an interactive stream, because this is quite cool. Okay, but what happened in the game is white decided not to take that pawn, went for A5, okay. and just moving the knight around seemingly randomly, looking for a mistake. So in this position, offers the trade of knights, takes, still completely drawn. But black blunders here. The way it's completely drawn is you just bring your king back. At some point white has to take this pawn, and we see here, wouldn't it have been better if the black pawn had been here, so much further out, and more time for black to get his. But actually this is just enough time for black to position himself so that when the white king comes here, the black king comes here. After a waiting move, you can still come here and you're okay. You're controlling these two squares. I think this is, yeah, this is drawn. Instead, black made a big blunder. He thought he could win a race. If you're going to try and win a race, you better counter accurately. He's not even going to start a race. He can't even start a race. All his pawns are going to get taken. He's in complete Zugzwang. Very unfortunate end for black to a game where black had lots of ideas, but very, very nice play from Dulce 7781 as white, you know, refuting those ideas. Okay, in one case, incorrectly refuting those ideas, and the endgame, just playing out the end. Even though white is worse in this endgame, he plays it out and he takes his chance. In this, now it's worse but drawing, I mean completely drawing. He takes his chance and it's black who, and the reason why black loses this is black had the mindset, I'm sure, this whole time, I'm going for the win, which is perfectly fine. But make sure when you're going for the win, not to, and this is what's so tough about pawn endgames, you can be going for the win and hang a loss. That is something that happens a lot in pawn endgames. For sure that it could have been time trouble. Black might not have had time to count. And I'm going to share the link to the study after the game. And in the study, I've got links to all the games. At the top of each study, I've got a link to the game, so we could even see. So you can actually look at the moves we played through, and you can. So this move was done with. Yeah, I think it was less than a minute on the clock, so I think Bocuse is right there. Yeah, okay, so that was chapter 4. So chapter 5 of I shouldn't go there. That's gone straight to the end. So I will share a link to the study at the end, and I'll post it on the Slack, so all the members of the league can see it as well. So in chapter 5, it was 2 stars of the league, 2 players who both won like 7 out of 8 of their games. So as white, it was Tranzoo, and as black, Alcibiades won. And the opening was the Giucco piano. And again, I'm very impressed by how well the opening was being played by a lot of these players. And how much preparation, because it's a league, you can try and look what openings your opponent plays and try to prepare openings against it. And it's quite impressive how well people play their openings. So this is a nice move, giving you a space to drop back the bishop. You could ask, why don't I play a5? Because a5 there's more space. But maybe one disadvantage of playing a5 is this square becomes a little bit tender. So for example, white might play h3 first, just to avoid the annoying pin of the knight to the queen. Castles, develop the rook, and if ever that bishop is challenged, it just has a nice hiding place on g4 or g5, b5. Sorry. Why does it want a hiding place? No reason, but it has this opportunity. And so this would be just an example line if black had played a5. Yeah, bishop here is a nice move because yeah, this is not what was played at all, but it's just interesting. In this position, I think many players, even myself, might consider playing d5 in this position. It looks good, it claims more space. But I think something which one needs to become aware of as one gets better is sometimes it's better to maintain tension. than to claim the extra space, because the tension benefits white. And black can never take that pawn, because, well, he can, but if ever black takes the pawn, it's white who benefits. d5, c6. Yes, d5, c6 is definitely a nice idea in this position. And also just d5, just drop the bishop back, also works, and play c6 later. So they're both perfectly decent. So c6, yes, c6, maybe the pawn structure is not ideal, actually, with c6 immediately. Yeah, so this, so maybe c6 immediately, you're creating a few too many weaknesses. You have the queen coming in here. So c6 is definitely an idea in this position. Yeah, after moving the bishop, yeah. c6 is definitely something in the position. But yeah, so just to go through this again, c6 immediately, maybe. But I'm saying actually it's better for white. Yeah, or just moving the bishop, dropping the bishop back is also good, and takes, and then at some point going c6 later. Yeah, this is. I mean, yeah, it's okay for black. So I think it's better in this position for white to maintain the tension. And play a move like bishop g5, which is really awkward because you don't. I mean, you could move the knight back. But the problem is, if you move the knight, so this would be an example of a blunder, and this shows the advantage of this tension. Takes, exchange off queens. Not like that. That would be a mouse slip. Exchange off queens, and you just won a free piece. Oh, and you're just winning another free piece. Okay, so this is not at all. Okay, black would never go knight to e8, but it illustrates if knight to here is pawn here. I mean, it illustrates black is in a little bit of trouble with that tension in the position. What was wrong with taking on e5? So nothing wrong with taking on e5, but you're replacing your e-pawn. You're losing your e-pawn for white's c-pawn. So it's a white just gets this sort of like tiny minor positional advantage. Because he's got now a big center and he's gonna come crashing down the board. Oh, taking on e5. So we drop back, bishop here, taking on e. Oh, I see. After here, no. Not d4, taking on e5. How do we take on? Oh. Yeah, what's wrong with white taking on e5? Yeah, there's not. Oh, I see. There's nothing wrong at all with white taking on e5. But as this, it's quite a good idea. Yeah, I'm going to come to that. White can take on e5, and that would open up this file. But white hasn't connected their rooks yet. What white and as I said, black doesn't really want to take on d4. So what white should do is take advantage of the fact that black doesn't really want to take on d4, get himself organized, stick a rook on d1, and then take his time. There's no rush, and that's something. It's not obvious at all. That's something. So black's best move in this position would be something like this, and maybe then you could advance. This is playable, and then you have tactics. Yeah, you've just doubled up his pawns. I mean, so you're getting something out of it, or you could, as I said. Okay, so we'll see this position crop up later because. Okay, so a6. I was saying this is all a variation along a5. So a6, a4. Now notice white doesn't have the same problem of a tender spot here. This is defended. So notice in this position it's very symmetric, but white's got a slight spatial advantage. And okay, so slight advantage to white. Castles, b5, b4. So the bishop has to drop back. Okay, so white is doing really nicely here. Tranzoo is doing very nicely against Alcibiades. But here he goes knight b to d2. Now, this is maybe even the most popular move in the position, but it does block in the white bishop a little, and so the knight has to move again. Is it going here? Is it going here maybe after a rook move? So it's certainly asking a question, where's the knight going? I mean, maybe it's a good move, but another idea would have been to develop the knight that way. That's also slow, admittedly. So this is possible, this is possible. I guess either way you're targeting this key d4 square, so that they're both good. As we saw in the game, his actual plan was some kind of rerouting the knight to the king side, which is a pretty decent idea. So I'm not going to criticize that. So h3, stopping an annoying pin. Knight h5. But there was something earlier I wanted to discuss. Yes, there was another move instead of knight d2, which I really would have liked to play as white in this position, and that's bishop g5, because this pin is really annoying. And you can play knight to d2 afterwards. Now, as I said, I think knight to d2 in the database might even be more popular, but this to me feels like a much better move. And I'm not even saying Stockfish prefers it. I'm just saying it just feels. There's quite nice ideas though. If you go h6, bishop h4, and this actually has been played, and it's a game I discovered. It's very interesting, I think. g5. Now, almost always in this sort of situation, if black goes g5, you kind of have to drop the bishop back. You don't really want to sack a piece for 2 pawns. You don't have enough pieces pointing at black's king, and black can get his pieces organized in defense. However, in this situation, the pin on the knight is really annoying, and there's no piece that can defend it apart from the king. And the reason it has to defend it is because the queen's coming in to double up the attack. But the king can't defend it forever, so you want to move the rook to h8 just to give the king an escape route. But we're only going to be able to escape with the king if we can somehow either get the bishop to exchange on f6, or somehow either distract the queen or distract the bishop. And there's a very nice move, which was from a game between Breda and Kerman in 2018. So it's a very recent development, in which this line was played, and white was probably thinking, this is pretty cool, I've got a nice attack. He played knight d2, which is the strongest move in this position. And a very nice move that Kerman found, king g6. And this seems almost crazy. Why would you go king g6? But it's very hard to defend this bishop. And what actually happened in that game is white tried to defend the bishop with h4, and black played bishop to g4, attacking the queen. And okay, so one line would be you go queen takes bishop, knight takes queen, bishop takes queen, rook takes bishop. I imagine rook a takes bishop, and you're still got to attack on this pawn. But in this position, black is actually doing okay. He's exchanged off queen, so he's not worried about his open king so much. His rooks are looking kind of annoying, and so white has to play either g3 or knight f3 to defend that pawn. In the meantime, black's pieces are good, basically, even though black's pieces are good and he's a piece up. So the sack doesn't work. The queens are exchanged and the sack doesn't work. Okay. But white doesn't have to play h4. He could also play bishop e3 or something. And this is kind of dangerous with the king on g6. So I think actually in this position, black's best move is to drop back quickly to g7, or things will get very dangerous. So white can actually get a draw here. We're going bishop g5, and but maybe black can try and go for the win with queen to d7 and bring the queen in, try and exchange off queens, and after all, black is a queen up. So, and I'd say this is for the those with big engines to try and analyze. Is black safe with the king on g6? Can you just exchange off queens? And I suspect maybe Kerman analyzed it with an engine and found. So in the football, is it 1-1 between Belgium and Japan? So let me know. Okay, so we don't have Nightbot for the football. Okay. So it would be, yeah, I would say it's almost worth taking the draw in that situation. But maybe black can go for a win. So anyway, this is a sort of a line which has only once happened in competitive play, and it wasn't in the database. And then once you reach this position, this was in the database. So somehow it took a slightly different route. But yeah, this pin is very annoying. If black does not play g5, how do you defend this knight? And honestly, one way of doing it is going knight back to g8 and to d7, and then your queen is free to wander around. So it's a very annoying pin. So I feel that would have been slightly better than knight to d2. But knight to d2 is okay. It's just, where is that knight going? You have to ask yourself, where do we want to put that knight? And yeah, Tranzoo had an idea. He wanted to put his knight on f1. Okay, it's a little bit dangerous because knight can't go to g3 immediately because of this sneaky bishop pinning the f pawn to the king. But it doesn't need to immediately, and so a very nice move, bishop to e3, defending against that diagonal. Worth saying, instead of knight to e7, black had a very interesting move in this position, which is queen to g6. And you're planning on moving your knight here. White might exchange off the bishop for the knight just to stop all the mating threats. White would probably do this just to block the bishop diagonal, and there are lots of variations. You could go knight to f4, but actually knight to g3 would be good. You could swap off bishop for knight, or you could just go knight to g3 to block that file. And so that would give reason to doing this sequence, and white's doing okay here. But instead of going knight to f4, black has other ideas potentially, which is e takes d4, attack the queen. Anyway, so there are some crazy lines. I think this is a really crazy line I found. But so you take the pawn, you attack the queen. Okay, then the queen has to give up that knight. It gives up the knight, but it sets up a threat on f7, which has to be blocked. But now you take this pawn, and you've got a double attack on the knight and the bishop. Okay. He takes this bishop, so he's threatening now a back rank. You can't take either knight or bishop, or white will back rank mate you. So what you do is you attack the queen. Attack on the queen can't be ignored, right? The knight and bishop are both being attacked. So this is madness. This is stockfish madness, yeah. Knight and bishop both being attacked. What you're afraid of is queen takes knight at the end of this line if you just move the queen. So what you do is you just sack your knight for the pawn. Obviously you have to take. Obviously you can't take back with this pawn because of that annoying bishop. So you have to take this bishop. At least you're not being back rank mated anymore because you've got g7 to run to, right? Right, but now the bishop can escape and threaten mate on h6, but you exchange off in time. King cannot take this bishop because otherwise rook goes here, check, king has to take the rook and you lose your queen. So you have to run, and then the queen comes here, check, you block. At the end of the day, he wins your rook, you win his bishop. Check, you lose your queen, but you lose. You attack his queen, he attacks your queen back. Queens get exchanged. So this would be a crazy line. At the end of it, maybe white slightly winning, but I think it was a fun line to show because of all the tactics involved in that line. So yeah, that was just some stockfish madness for you, showing you can't say the Giucco piano is boring, for example. Okay, so that was some crazy stuff which could have happened if queen to g3, d4, and stuff opens up. So Tranzoo saw all this and decided to go for the quieter line, brackets, sarcasm, close brackets, or rather, Alcibiades didn't opt for that as well. And okay, this is a nice, I mean, this is a nice looking move. Takes off the bishop, and the rook looks really awkward on h7. And that bishop was an annoying bishop because these bishops in this kind of setup are staring straight at the king. They stop you ever moving the king to h8 if you ever want to dodge any attack along the g file. So these bishops are really annoying. So I think this is a nice move. I mean, Stockfish might not always agree, but I think it was nice. So g6 is just I think it was a strange looking move from Alcibiades, but actually I like the idea of it. I mean, it's a strange looking move because it doesn't stop any knights going here because these squares are already protected. It might intend h5, g5, some kind of push, but this doesn't seem wise because white's got more pieces on the king side than black, so it seems like a little bit dangerous. But the one reason why I quite like the move g6 is it gives the black king a square to go to where it can defend f7 while not being pinned to f7. So it's an interesting move, I would say. So yeah, I would say in my study I marked this as interesting. d4, very good move from Tranzoo. This is sort of the thematic move in white in this position, sort of breaking through the center. E takes d4. I think this is a mistake. We saw this earlier. Going e takes d, taking this, you're just strengthening white's center. Knight to c6, rook to b1. But no, rook to b1 is not. This is not a valuable move. So all that there was no need to push. I can see why he didn't want to push this pawn because that blocks off his bishop. That's very sensible. Rook to b1 has the idea of pushing this pawn, which you might want to do at some point, but this rook is silly on a7 and you don't really want to open it up. Suddenly that rook becomes perfectly placed. The bishop could move to d7, the other rook could swing over to a8. This rook would become a real asset if the a file opened up. So rook to b1, yeah, I don't like this move so much. A very interesting idea, and again, this is quite difficult to spot, but this is what the really, the IMs and the GMs, they're very good at spotting the pawn breaks. So where have I got play in this position? I don't want to push this pawn because it blocks my bishop. I want to. This is the pawn break white wants to play. Having said that, you always have to prepare the pawn break. You can't just break and hope for the best. And this idea, why is this a good idea? Because on the face of it, takes. Okay, in these sort of situations, just count 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces attacking this square. How many defenders? 1, 2, 3. So common sense would say you can't break in this position. Black's got more defenders than attackers. But after takes, you have knight e4. Okay, and suppose black dropped back because he wants to keep his 4 defenders. D takes e5, and if white takes, that doesn't work because the back rank is weak. And queen, let me see, queen to f8, but then we've got knight to f6 check. I haven't seen a finish yet. King to g7. It's just stuff to watch out for. Is there a finish? This rook is hanging suddenly. Am I missing something? But also the queen is hanging. Queen takes queen, rook takes rook. So let me just check that again. Knight takes knight. Yes, you could just take the queen and take the rook, surely. Could you? Queen takes queen, king takes queen, and then take the rook, and you're ending up sort of a piece up. Rook, knight, bishop, rook, knight, bishop. Yeah, so white would be winning in that line. But hang on, so how did that all happen? He could have taken with the knight instead of with the rook, but then he's leaving himself open to a discovery, which he then has to take, and then you've got rook takes rook, king here, and rook can take an extra piece as well. Okay, so it's not simple at all. But it's sort of tactical reasons why that this pawn is actually poisoned and you can't just do a set of exchanges. And I guess all those tactical reasons come from the fact that black hasn't developed his bishop, his rook is in a stupid place, and yeah, so the pawn break would have worked, but it's not obvious. It would have required very careful calculation when you have lots of time on the clock. The back rank is poisoned. So e5, this is a very interesting idea, but not very easy necessarily to spot. After knight e4, you could also go to e7, and yeah, there are sorts of lines. Again, pawn takes pawn, you're threatening knight here. Or what else? Another interesting move in this position. So suppose you didn't spot e5. Okay, what would you play? I mean, what I would play in this position is queen to b3, because I wouldn't necessarily spot at e5. And queen to b3 is just a nice solid move. You stick your rook on d1, and yeah, maybe you just gradually improve your position. So yeah, so the rook, he improves his position, you improve your position. This would just be a more sensible. And here again, the back rank issue is why this is safe. You're threatening f6, so this would have been a very kind of sensible line too. You're not winning by any means, but you have a pleasant position as white. So this would be the way to play it as white. Let's just So hopefully I went through that all rather quickly, but the key idea is you want to do that pawn break. You want to put your queen on this nice diagonal. You want to put your rook on the nice rook file. You want to do the break, and you also want to eventually get your knight into this nice central square. Knights love the center, so I could run through that line again. So instead of this, queen to b3 is not the best move in this position because the pawn break is even better. But it's a very, very safe, solid way of playing, which I think the players would have appreciated. Here, that has to be defended. Move the rook, maybe. It's a way of making the black pieces very passive. Exchange, exchange, attack, move out of the way. Something like this. It's not by any means winning for white, but it's just very pleasant to play. Another idea instead of this is also, that's the way I'd have played it. Actually, the computer actually quite likes a b5 break in this position. I don't know why, but it likes the idea. So it plays it like this, if you actually ask the engine. Okay, so black does something very sensible, gets the rook back into a sensible position. Okay, that's good. The queen goes to d2. And yeah, this unfortunately falls for a tactic, which Alcibiades found, which is simply knight takes pawn. If you take the knight back, you win the knight. So you just won a free pawn. And the move for Tranzoo here was not to continue down the line of the tactic. Obviously, he recognized that if it takes a knight, I lose this knight. He should have asked himself, which knight is more valuable? This knight or this? Or which knight is this knight to me or that knight to him? And this knight's on the edge of the board. It is going to have to move back at some point anyway, a waste of tempo. Going here would have been potentially dangerous because the king is then, because of knight. No, let me see. Let me just see if is king. Yeah, you're not guarding this f2 pawn if you go king h1, h2. But let's just. I'm going to ask the engine what it would do against this. It actually wouldn't take. Sorry, the pawn is defended. I'm being stupid. What would it do in this position? Let's just open up the engine. So curiously, it would do this and just say, "Yay, I won a pawn." Okay, I don't get this. Why would it do that? Can't I just take this knight? No, the knight's defended by the bishop. And okay, so still the same tactic remains. Anyway, it seems obvious though in this sort of position that king f1 just feels safer than king h1 or king h2. I don't have a concrete line, so actually king h1 and king h2 are actually playable. But yeah, king f1 is fine, and the knight doesn't have any future. There, it's going to have to move back, and I think that's still fairly equal. But this kind of messes up white's pawn structure, messes up white's king, and makes the position a little bit easier for black to play. And this move again is not good because it's blocking in white's best piece, this light squared bishop. So the fundamental idea, always in this position, even a little bit earlier, I think several times this. So obviously here the idea was, so here again e5 is still an idea in this position. So for a few moves, e5 wasn't a potential idea in this position. So when eventually this move is played, e5 is still a potential move. It's not really good. Maybe rook d3. No, rook to e3, rook to d3. This pawn is under attack. Rook to IC, rook to d3. Defending this pawn is probably the way to go. So I'll just. But yes, I can understand why this was played, because to try and. But it does block in the best piece, and yeah, black finds this move, which is very annoying. Knight d4. It's coming in for a royal fork on the king, the rook, and the queen. And how can white defend? So why can't white play something like bishop to here? Because obviously the other, it's attacking the rook as well straight away. Yeah. So this is very annoying. So white played something sensible and just loses the exchange, and yeah, the game becomes very difficult. The exchange down and weakness in white's position. So it's not. Yeah. So just going back here. So it drops a pawn, and then this is very weakening of white's position, and yeah, this move, it's really difficult. You somehow need to maintain position. White's still doing okay, but the weakness here. But this is, I mean, if I just open the engine, mine is 0.3, so it's still pretty level. But this this move blocks in the bishop, and it allows for this tactic, and there's no way out of losing the exchange. So it becomes very difficult for white. So bishop e2, queen to c3. So black's pieces are becoming very active. Rook to b1, defending the b pawn, which is under attack. Queen to d4. Queen to h4. It's a nice move because it's threatening this. And in this position, yeah, black goes for a tactic, f5, hoping that, obviously, pawn takes pawn, queen takes queen. And probably thinking, if queen here, check, king here, if I lose this pawn, maybe I've got the rook coming back to defend, and in the meantime, I've got a sufficient counterattack. I mean, let's just have a look at that line. Queen here, check, king here. What if queen takes pawn, check? Just rook e7. Yeah, queen could win another pawn, but yeah, I mean, black is black wins this pawn. I mean, okay, so it's not 100% clear what's going. I mean, I think black has really allowed something with f5. So black, I mean, black is still okay here, but f5 kind of allows the queen to invade. And it turns out there's an even stronger move for white in this position, even stronger than queen here check. See, the thing with queen here check is then the king can come in and the rook can defend. But if you go rook here first, okay, so that queen d8 is a check, rook here and rook takes c7 is a threat. But if you go rook c1 first, it's very hard to defend c7. So what, I mean, because if you do something like queen b6, simply queen d8 check and rook takes pawn check. This is getting very serious because the queen is coming in with check, also attacking this square. Basically, the only defense for black is c6, just blocking up the rook file. Obviously, white will take, and then And black doesn't want to take back and open that file, so you probably attack the rook, check, rook has to get out of the way, and then try and start a new attack on this file's been blocked. Try and start a new attack on this file. It's just because it's quicker than taking and getting to c7. So rook to c1 is a very nice move. Pretty hard to spot because it's the idea of there's always this idea of rook to c1 to c7, but it's a question of move order. Which should I do first? Queen d8 first or rook c1 to c7 first? And because queen d8 invites the king to help protect the rook to get back in defense, it's for that reason rook c1 first is really nice. But unfortunately for Tranzoo, he didn't spot that invasion. He went for queen here, and now with bishop to d7, black's defending his back rank issues. King to g2, rook a to e8, f4, rook takes e4. So he's exchanging. So black is sacrificing the rook, but he's also gotten a big attack on the white king. And it was in this position white thought he could get away with taking the bishop, but he missed. Very nice move after queen takes bishop. So I'll stop it here. So in this position, black has mate in 3. How did I do? I was on board 2 and I scored 5 out of 8. And I had the longest game in the league because I had a 3-hour and 2-minute game against a guy who won all his games on board 2. So I gave him a tough test, but he got me in the end as well. Rook c1 is the stuff I hope to play one day, said Tranzoo, both in the chat here and also after the game I saw. Yeah, rook c1. And so how do you play moves like that? You think you have the idea of rook c1. That's always lurking in the position, but it's move order, like getting the moves in the right move order. You have all these ideas. So one thing is having the ideas, and there are players who have all these great ideas, and the other thing is having those ideas in the right order, and it's tough. It requires calculation. You can't rely purely on intuition. Intuition will give you the ideas, but to actually work out which order to put them in, okay, intuition can also help, but you need to calculate. Okay, so can you see the mate? Rook takes bishop. King tries to escape from mate, but there is no escaping. And at this point, white resigned. But as I said, these two players, Tranzoo, Alcibiades, they both won almost all their games in the league. So I think it was a very nice game they had between each other here. And Oddskill says, how is rook c1 in the air already? In this position? Well, it's in the air. Well, so the immediate move is queen d8. Queen takes pawn. But the queen alone is not going to checkmate, so obviously you want to bring the rook into the attack. So rook c1, rook takes c7 is definitely an idea which it's on the agenda. But you need to go rook c1 first, then go queen takes d8 check, then go rook takes c7. It's like that's the order. So yeah, the idea comes up because you want to bring the rook into the attack, into any attack, and you have a queen invasion, which is great, but I said the queen invasion alone is just too easy. If you do rook c1 now, it's rook here defends. This is not bad. I mean, this is also okay for white. But white with the queen, you can't checkmate with the queen alone. You need another piece. So white isn't winning. Yeah, and so it's about, okay, so it's actually the same philosophy as we saw in the earlier analysis study. You need to bring your forces in before you. Sometimes you need to act immediately. Just go straight in, sacrifice, because there's no time. But sometimes, as we saw in this position here, you can actually go in and sacrifice directly. but I was saying something. But there's no hurry. This pawn is always going to be there to sacrifice on. So the idea of if f5, the idea of just bringing in another piece into the attack before launching the sacrifice. It's not necessarily. Even this is not completely winning immediately, but it's just it looks a lot more powerful when you have another piece in the attack. If you go in directly, it becomes you then have to do those moves, bringing the pieces in, and they could take time. So the times when you should go in directly are like in RealRobbert's game, where if you don't go in directly, black is going to organize his defenses, and will be able to. So it's like, can black organize his defenses in time? So which way is black going to do best to organize his? Yeah, and it requires calculation to look at both. And the final game I'm going to look at before I return to the puzzle with which I started the stream is another board 6 game, and this was the game that decided the league. So I think it's worth bringing up the standings. So I know it's slightly small, but hopefully it's visible. There were 40 teams in the league, and I know some of the names are a bit cut off. So 14 was Team 777, 15 Throw in the Towel, 16 Chesperado, 17 Forgotten Gambits, 18 Board Zero, 19 Czech Republic, 20 Disregard Money Acquire Elo. But the top three were not okay with any name actually. Second was Pineapple Pizza Connoisseurs Reloaded, and third, the team which was leading the entire tournament, was All You Need Is Left. You see, like, they won, they drew one, they won. And in the final round, round 8, in the 8th week, they were up against We're Not Okay With Any Name Actually. And they needed a draw to win the league. And they were 2-3 down, with just their board 6 to play. And their board 6 was rated about 200 points lower than the opposition. So, if I just run through, We're Not Okay With Any Name actually had Litzr on 1590 as their board 6. So congratulations to all these guys for winning the league. Rose 97, Mile, Tinan, SGIS, Napoleon Solo, and Litzr for winning the league. Pineapple Pizza Connoisseurs Reloaded jumped up to second place in week 8. And All You Need Is Left finished in last place because their board 6, bit of a spoiler, Ryan 89 he needed a win in this very final game of the league, and the final weekend against someone 200 points higher rated than him, which is a tough ask. But these guys did a great job. They were leading almost the entire time. So we're just going to have a quick look at the game, and unlike in the other games where the openings were like flawless, a lot of these players, this was a bit of a Belgium 2, Japan 2, thanks for the update, Tranzoo. This was a bit of the opening went a bit wrong. And so Ryan 89 was playing a team called All You Need Is Left, led by Sonata 2, and the name is partly inspired by the expression, of course, in chess, All You Need Is Left. But also there's a player on the Lichess website called All You Need Is Left, who's a top Crazy House player. And the idea is, of course, that it's really true, all you need is left. It's, as long as you have a spare square to go to with your king, you can never be checkmated. So imagine if you had a chessboard and there was a little pocket underneath the board where you could hide your king. If you could just move your king to that square, the opponent could never checkmate you. All you need is just that little space to run to. So it's a very deep little proverb. It's not just you should play h3 to avoid being back rank checkmated, which is true. Actually, as long as you have a square to run to, you can never be mated. So it's a nice name, but We're Not Okay With Any Name actually win season 12, and this is how they did it. And I'm going to look at it actually from Ryan 89's perspective as black. It was a little bit of an opening disaster, to be frank. That's not his fault. It's like it's a Sicilian Alapin. It's tough. I mean, we're off book already. With knight f6, we're running into e5. So we're off book, and this is rather awkward. So obviously, in this position, you need to what would be standard would be something like e6. It's all about control of d5. I mean, even you could you could later also play d6 or d5. So if d4, okay, something very important. This kind of setup is a sort of, it's like the modern setup. You're letting white take the center, but you have to challenge the center. And we'll see again and again in this game. It's very imperative if black plays this kind of system. If you give white the center, but you must challenge the center. So this is interesting, but it's very high level. I mean, it's a very high level play to play stuff like this. You have to really know what you're doing. If you're going to let the pawn go to e5 and let your knight get chucked around, you're not immediately losing, but you're going to have to play some sharp stuff. And it's not solid. It's not solid play. So that's why I'm saying I would recommend this would be a much more standard approach. The moment white tries to go d4, you challenge the center. You challenge, yeah. You stick, and this is much nicer. You can see. Yeah, you take over the center. Even e4 is okay. So, okay, I mean, this is running through. This would be very. This would be how I'd recommend black to play this sort of position. So e6, d5. Eventually, move your rook to e8. Move your bishop to because he's moved his pawn to h3. Your bishop should go to e6. Move your rook to c8 to take the c file, the e file. Sometimes you want to move your pawn to a6. Now, why do you want to do that again? Maybe your queen will come to b6 eventually. So you just develop your pieces in a very natural way. There's a reason for why a6 is interesting, but I can't see why at the moment. But okay, so this would be fine. If you're going to play something like this, you're going to certainly get an interesting game because that knight is going to be kicked about. It can't go to here, or it gets trapped immediately. It could go to here, and then it could get chased. I mean, this is kind of unclear. It's potentially going to get chased about quite a lot. d4, where do you go? If you go to e6, the point is you're inviting d5, and this sort of thing can happen, where white gets... Okay, I went through that too quickly. Knight to c7, d6. The point is white gets a pawn stuck on d6. He could take back immediately, and that's perfectly fine. But actually, even better, according to the engines, is to go like here, and then take, and lose the bishop and take the knight instead, because you can bring your queen in here with mating threats. So black isn't losing their ways of defending the mating threat, but it's just very awkward. So it's even possible, crazy engine lines, you just give your king a squares to run to, and when white queen takes that, you take this. That's not very natural. Even just taking back is fine for white, and not very... I mean, it's not losing for black by any means. This pawn is very advanced and not so defended, but it's a suffocating pawn. It's very hard to play as black. Okay, so you don't really want to go down that line. And there's another weird line which you could, which black could play, which is to say, okay, I give up to play this and then play this. And now at least we've got a sensible position, although we've lost a pawn. So you give up a pawn in order to get some sort of sense of decency back into your position. Okay, so that was just a crazy line if you go knight a5. Okay, so I think he did a better move. He went knight to g4. Although where's that knight heading next? Basically it's heading to h6, which is okay. It's not ideal, but okay. So d4. Now this is the very important point I wanted to make clear. If white takes the center, it's really, in all these positions where you're these sorts of modern defense, you want to challenge that center. You should be going takes. And this happened in my own game. I played a perk defense against the guy who won 7 out of 7 or something in the league. And he gave me an option, either take the center or close up the center. And closing up the center was very appealing because it gave me extra space and other reasons. But in these kind of perk sort of setups, basically about 80-90% of the time, you want to break it open. To exchange your c pawn for their c pawn. And what do you do next? You want to break it open again. You need to break it open to get breathing room. If he attacks you, okay, drop back. If he castles, takes. Okay, I'm not saying you're winning this at all as black, but you're doing a lot better than what happens in the game. Okay, so now an interesting tactic from white was bishop takes f7. Actually, not the best move, interestingly. So the idea is you take the bishop and you just won a free pawn, because the king has to drop back and the queen's going to pick up the knight. Curiously, there's another move which is very hard to find, which is actually attacking the knight and pushing it back and taking on c5. Just using the fact that this bishop is sort of accepting the gambit. The moments the bishop isn't protecting this pawn, it's very hard to pick up this pawn again because there's a pawn on c3. So this move is coming in immediately afterwards. If for example, the queen moves out to here. These pawns can't be budged. So white is just a free pawn up, and although it's double pawns, white's got look at the control of the center. So actually that was the best move. But the reason it's the best move is something curious, which the players didn't discover, which ideally Ryan89, it would have required some deep calculation. And that was that if you take the bishop and he checks you and you fall back and he takes the knight, white is a pawn up. White is a pawn up, but if you take this pawn, he has to take back with the pawn because the knight's defending the square. And you have this move, queen to b6, hitting both this pawn and this pawn, b2 and d4. And there's no way for white to defend both pawns. If the bishop moves to here, you're picking up the other one. So you're actually winning the pawn back. And that's really awkward because actually you can't, it's not only are you winning the pawn back, you're winning this pawn back. And if this pawn drops, then the e5 pawn also drops. So you're in the really curious situation where actually black would have been better. The tactic didn't work for the very curious reason that you lose a pawn, but you end up winning 2 pawns back in the long run, not over the next 10 to 15 moves. d5, and now this pawn is hanging. I mean, I don't have the engine on, but I'm just guessing, just take this, and now this pawn is going to be weak. But it is quite surprising. But this is not what happened in the game because, understandably, black didn't want to open up. Didn't want to open himself up. I mean, didn't want to do the exchange of this knight for that bishop while activating the white queen. I mean, there are arguments either way. And the very logical move, and the best move I'm sure in the position, just withdraw the bishop. Thanks for the free pawn. And it's not just a free pawn, it's like black's position is pretty hopeless almost. But again, what should black do in this position as a general strategy? He should break the center. I mean, even though the king is so out of place, he needs to break the center, or those pawns are going to advance. So d6 is what he played. So okay, d6 is okay. And knight g5, very nice move, pretty hard to defend. And black did defend by playing d5, so very good move to block. But now queen to f3, and we've got a double attack on this as well as check. It's very hard, very, very hard. So black gives back the knight to try and defend his king, and drops the d pawn. So this is a point where I would say the opening has been a bit of a disaster for black because he's got his king on f8. It's almost game over. And it would have been game over if white had played the pretty natural move in this position, which is knight f7. And okay, but hang on a second. Why not queen here, check. And then queen to e2. Queen takes queen, king takes queen. Okay, so white's happy because he's exchanged off material and he's already material up. But maybe that's a way for black to save the rook. Is it? Maybe the rook is coming to e1. So there are problems. The knight is going to be coming out with a discovered attack on the rook. The rook will be coming back again. The rook will be threatening the back rank, so it's probably necessary to move pieces up to try and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. I mean, whether this attack works or not, white is a piece up, and white is a piece up plus an attack. So yeah, that would have been lights out because it forces the queen trade. Instead, what also looks decent is knight e6. So that also exchanges stuff off, right? But it's not smart because after bishop takes knight, bishop takes bishop, black actually has an opportunity to get back into the game. Is king d? Yeah. So in this position, someone was asking after knight here, check, queen here. Is king d1? Okay, but if you do king d1, black's thing is black's probably happy. Yeah, so I think it's okay, but why would, as white, will you want to exchange off queens? Because you're simplifying the position. So it's actually, yeah, there's no reason why king d1 or king f1 or something is bad, but yeah, no, so that's a nice idea, but just swapping off queens is just it's a very kind of swapping off queens, and black has still got issues even with queens off. But yeah, that was also completely winning. But instead, white plays this move, which seems like it's exchanging pieces off, which is good, right? But black has a move in this position, which actually gets him back almost, yeah, I think maybe even to equal. No, maybe not quite to equal, but really he has a move to get back into the game. So can anyone spot the move for black? Queen e7 and rook e8, exactly. And unfortunately, actually it's not so straightforward. Queen e7, but it does work. So queen e7, queen e2, rook e8. White's got a nice move here, bishop c4, but it doesn't work. The thing is, if you go knight d8, then the bishop can move and you're not winning a queen. So the whole point of rook d8 is you are threatening queen takes queen. So if I go knight d8, then I can just move the bishop off if you do that. So it's all... and you might say, but surely you can do the same thing here. And so that's defending against queen takes queen, so it's saving the bishop, right? But there's another trick white might have up his sleeve. Queen takes queen, bishop takes queen, d3. That's pretty nice, and that is pretty nice. You'd have to do something like bishop e3 takes, and hope you don't have another pin on the next bishop, and that would work. There's another move that black has, which is simply queen here. And it's kind of hard. I mean, white has to do something like this, and so he is losing the bishop. He doesn't want this happening, so he's going to have to play like f3 or something. So let's see what the line I had. Queen d6 is also possible. Hang on, so let's see. Queen e7, queen e2 takes, bishop c4, queen c5. Oh, there is something interesting white can do. Yeah, he doesn't want to fall for this. He doesn't want that line we just went down. So instead, he moves the bishop back. But then we can go here again, and he has to lose it this time because now the queen isn't. So he will lose it in this line. Yeah, so he is losing a piece one way or another. Belgium scores in the last minute, says Tranzoo. Or just queen d6 first. Okay, so queen d6 first of all, yes. That also works. Yeah, and then that forces bishop e3, and we go down this line. D takes e3. He has to castle. We don't have. Yeah. You can take this pawn, and then queen takes pawn. Something like this. Yep. And this is equal game. So there was some. Maybe there's a better way for white to play it, but basically white has to give up a piece. Unfortunately, he played queen to e8, which means you can't double up. So white defends, it's not possible to double up. That comes with check, so he has to defend the check. So black, remember, is playing for a win. So he doesn't want to just, and is losing, so he doesn't want to exchange off queens. He does this. White just very simply castles. Now something I wanted to notice in this position. Knight, he does knight to e7. You'll see the key square in this position is e6. So this is especially important in Crazy House, but it's even important in chess. You have to look at which squares in your position are undefended. So when the knight was on f6, e6 is defended by the queen. There's activity on, there's some sort of like pressure. By going knight to d7, there's e6, you're giving this square right in the heart of your camp to the white's pieces. If they have one piece in your position, they can bring other pieces linked to it. This is really important in Crazy House, but even in normal chess. You'll see in this position how e6 becomes the fulcrum for white to launch an attack. He can castle, you can push the queen, and he just defends e6. f5, bishop g5, just creating some pins. Okay, exchange is off only because he wants to put more pressure on e6. And this is how the game is progressed. Queen to d6, knight. Remember, all black wants, all white wants to do is just exchange off and simplify the position. But a very nice way of doing that is just applying slow, steady pressure. Again, just building up. We're already controlling e6, just more control. Attacking the queen, and now in queen invasion. And this forces the queen trade. He tries to avoid the queen trade, but now the queen trade really is forced, and he resigns, because he's forcing queen takes queen to avoid losing another piece. e6 is very often a key attacking square. It is, and especially after black has gone f5. So if we just run through, after black has moved that. I mean, he lost the f pawn right from the beginning. So e6 is very much like the square of this game. But I think the sad point in this game is the opening, in a way, was a little bit sad for black. And not spotting this queen to e7. Otherwise, players playing really well. And the sad point for white is not finishing the game off immediately with this move. He was probably worried about this check, but then you just exchange off queens, and black's completely tied out. So the rook is kind of in sort of zugzwang. You put your rook on d1, everything's pinned in. It's a really tough position for black to play. Yeah, a position like this would be just completely dead. Yeah, but very good play from Litzr. Ryan89 really had, you have a weakness from the opening because of the f pawn, and that weakness really told. You have one chance to get back in the game, and it's hard to take those chances. But something I said at the beginning, I'm going to say it again. There's a Crazy House player called 12teen, and he is an example of, even in a losing position, and I think he's an example to anyone in the league or in any playing chess anywhere, to try and think, where is my play in this position? Where is my chink, my glimmer of hope for turning this around and winning this position? And he's a real example of that. And of course in Crazy House it's a lot easier because every piece you take, it comes into your hand. So you've got, if you're a queen down in chess, you might as well resign, pretty much, usually. Whereas in Crazy House, no problem, because you can keep on taking pieces. And although you'll still always be a queen down, at least you're getting a steady flow of new pieces into your hand, which you can then place on the board. And you may be a queen down, but you might have more pieces attacking the opponent king and win. And that's true to a lesser extent in chess. You have to think, where is my glimmer of hope? It might just be you might be a rook down, but you have a pawn on a pawn which have a possibility of making a passed pawn. That passed pawn is your chance to get that rook back. So you have to take those chances. And I know myself, I didn't take chances sometimes. But you have to always have the eye out. In order to take the chances, you have to not give up and see and spend time and say, he spotted this weakness because he played queen to e8, but this was a move to really think, how am I going to exploit this weakness to the maximum and find the right move? And it's unfortunate he didn't, and it's hard luck. He was playing a much tougher opponent, so he can't be expected to have won that game, and he did great, but he fought until the end, and now at this point it's all over. Yeah, if the game had continued, it would have continued to say like this. So you're attacking the rook. White would be happy to give up the rook because he's going to get a rook back, and yeah, this is two pieces down, completely game over. Okay, so that's been Ryan for board 6 for a 1300. He plays amazing. Or 1400. But now we're going to end with the puzzle we began on. This is a lovely position. It was the game on board 5 between Colwem and IMC Grat. Colwem's got himself in all kinds of trouble because in an earlier point in the game he was checked and he should have dropped back with the king to the back rank where he's got good protection. He ran forwards, got checked again, and he's got his king stuck on g4. This is like a bug house game. In bug house, with you're getting pieces from your partner and your positions being opened up completely. But there are no pieces, so every single piece must be used wisely. Okay, and there are not that many pieces left. And if you look at Black's position, he's a bishop down. Not only a bishop down, but these two pawns down. So White is in all kinds of trouble, but maybe if White can give back material to save himself, he will. And I'm sorry to say in the game, or sorry for IMC Grat 2, the game continued rook here, rook takes rook, the game rook here to defend the check, rook takes rook, knight takes rook, queen takes knight, and king drop back. And you've won the knight back, so you're closer to material equality, but the king has run back into relative safety, and you don't have your pieces mobilized to do anything now. So if anything, White's actually got a slight advantage here, because he's got the extra couple of pawns. So it turns out in the original position, after rook to d4, there are Black did have winning opportunities. And this isn't just like a straight puzzle, because it's not like there's one winning move. This is much more a strategy. Everything okay in the chat? Okay. So what strategy should White should Black use to win this position? So this is what we began the stream with, and the first thing I would say is Black's priority is to keep the white king stranded, to keep the white king from running back. Styly, you are a genius. And the second priority is to remove any defenders that are preventing mate. So a very natural thing to do in this position is rook takes rook and knight takes rook. There's a very subtle threat in this position if you were just to do a nothing move, like if you were to do something like knight takes bishop. So instead of queen takes knight, suppose you go knight takes bishop. Can you see the threat that white has in this position? You would say, oh, you have to be careful. Black's king's not so safe either. Queen takes pawn check. King would have to run back here or here. Knight here check. Oops. I'm dropping the queen. So there's a little, that's a little trap, tiny trap. Yeah, queen takes g2 and discovery. I'm sorry, I just told it too quickly, but so that's something to be aware of. Okay, and in this position, yeah, so queen takes knight is a mistake, but rook takes rook, knight takes. Yeah, you need to move the king out the way, and this is very powerful because the rook. The threat is rook here, check, because the bishop can't take the rook because it's pinned to the king. So that would be mate. The threat is also queen here check might also be a threat. Then the king could run here, but then you have knight here check, and the king would have to run here, and then queen here checkmate. So you've got some really nice threats in this position. Unfortunately, white's got a move that can just neutralize all those threats. Queen here defends both those squares. But this is still winning for black, and the key to win is to work out, okay, white is a piece up, but if I can just get rid of... basically, this bishop is a better defender than this knight as an attacker. Surprising, but it is. You take on b3. If the queen takes, we could be picking up a knight. So we could be getting close to material equality and our attack might continue. If the knight takes, then something very nice. This king is still stranded, but we can checkmate it with pawns, almost. a5, king to b5. Okay, so we can't quite checkmate it because it can keep on running to here. So what we do is we seal it in. Okay, now black. So what's the threat? The threat is rook here check, king here, pawn here, queen takes pawn, king takes, and we're winning a queen, so that would be good. So if white did something like a3 just to prevent just to protect a3 to protect this square. The problem is it just falls for this, winning the queen. So what else could white do? Could go queen to d4 to protect against. So if rook to c5 check could still happen, but then you go king a4, queen takes pawn. Oh, this is really bad because that's mate. Okay, so that's not going to work. What else could white do? King to a4. I think king to a4 is kind of the best hope. Try and run for it. And the idea is, if queen takes pawn, let me think. Then king to b5. So now you don't have this rook here check anymore because the queen is in the wrong place. So black could still be winning this, but it's kind of awkward. Actually, after king to a5, there's a very nice move that black has, which is rook to c3. And the point is that if the queen just moves, you have queen takes pawn check, rook, you sack the rook on that square, and you have checkmate. And yeah, there's nothing else that can be done. You take off that knight's got two defenders. You take off one defender with check, and you take off the other defender with your last piece you mate. So black just manages to mate in this sort of situation. Okay, so that's the kind of sequence. It's take off the defender and check, and yeah, you win the queen or you mate. Oh, something worth saying, by the way, in this position. Yeah, that's fine. You take this pawn. The only thing you have to be slightly careful of is obviously you don't fall in for this checkmate. So you don't sort of fall in for a back rank checkmate. But you've got queen against rook. The queen is just going to mop up the pawns. Okay. But what if, instead of taking back with the knight, he takes back with the queen? And again, there are multiple ways of winning. But let's see. This we looked at already. Yeah, that's fine. Oh, yeah, that was a mistake. I'm trying to work out where we were. So going back to the beginning again. So we're gonna go takes, knight takes. We're not going to take the knight. Instead, we're going to take the bishop. No, we're not going to take the bishop because then that we fall to mate. So king, we bring our king back, and he brings his queen back in defense. Yeah. Oh yeah. So I think we looked at all the variations. Okay, so there's one other. So knight takes bishop. What if queen takes knight? I think we didn't look at that. But that doesn't work because of a5 check, king to b5. How to finish this off? You could just take this knight, and then you're threatening rook here check. And I think this is going to be mating pretty soon as well. Yeah. That's that line. There's another defense white could try, which is quite sneaky, which is knight here check, just trying to give back the knight. But actually that doesn't work either. You could just take the knight, and if he takes your rook, it's just a very nice line. Knight takes pawn check. Notice that the king has got only 2 escape squares. He can't go to this escape square, or else queen here check, queen here will be mate. So he has to go to the other one. But then you have this check, and checkmate. Notice that a knight on a light square works very well with the pawn on the light square, because the knight covers the dark squares and the pawn covers the light squares. This is something very useful in Crazy House to be aware of. But we have a very beautiful mate there. So yeah, lots of pretty mates to be found. But actually that's not the best move. I think I accidentally showed the best move in the original position. And Stiley spotted it. Knight takes b3 is so unintuitive for me. Yeah, well you'll see why knight takes b3 is so powerful in this variation. You said move the king. Stiley, move the king, you're just going to lose your rook. Now we're a rook and a piece down. But this is the best move. This is mate in 4. So I wonder who can spot it. And it's the unintuitive move. Hint, hint. But the reason is because if you just check with the queen, that's the other possibility, he's just going to run back. And now the rook is doing great lateral defense. Yeah, so why is this mating? I mean, I'm not going to give it away. I'm just saying, why is this forced mate? So he has to take it. Okay, just take it with this. Okay, why is this force mate? Okay. And no more hints. This is going to be the last thing on the stream. Until someone in the chat can solve. Black to move and mate. It clears a5. a5 is possible. And remember the rook is cutting off this, so king would have to go either here or here. Then what? Well, the thing is, once the king is here, the king could actually take this as well. So you've got to be careful. You'd have to go king here first, and then rook c5. Yes, that will mate eventually. So a5, king here, and okay, he could try and defend with this, but you just come in. So you can take my rook, then I mate you here. So if he tries to do this, then this. And if he blocks, then you have check, blocks, and checkmate. You sack all your pieces, block the queen, and you get mate. So that is possible, but it's not the mate not the mate in 3 I'm looking for. Okay, maybe I'll give a tiny hint. It's called a dovetail mate. a6. The thing is, there's no piece he can run back at some point, and then even run here. Whenever you deliver this check, you can run away. So if you go a6, you don't have very many pieces in this attack. That's the problem. So black to move and mate in 3. You're doing a great job cutting him off. You just need to... Tranzoo, you are the one. Queen a2, and it's a dovetail mate. He's completely trapped, no squares left apart from this one. You could try and do this, giving him a flight square. Yeah, Steli was a genius because he saw that it was queen queen here checkmate. Steli was a genius because he just hung his rook and said it's going to work. But Tranzoo was the one who enunciated how it would work, because geniuses can't explain themselves. That's the difference between a genius and the non-genius. The non-genius can explain how he reaches his answer. The genius, there's no explanation. He doesn't know why he's playing the moves he does, but they just work. Yeah, so look, just going that again. Isn't that pretty? You can sack the rook, you take away the key piece, and you get a dovetail mate. Dovetail mate is because this is it's a diagonal mate, and these two squares are like are kind of blocking the king's retreat. So this sort of mate where you control this, and these two squares are blocked, is called a dovetail mate. Oh, did he? I didn't realise. Nice one, Styley. I didn't realise you saw Queen A2 in the chat as well. Nice. So congratulations to to all the players in the league for playing such nice games. And thanks to all of you watching. And just to say, do add me on Twitch, especially if you're interested in watching Crazy House. I usually commentate on elite players playing. I sometimes play myself, And there's one just last thing I want to show you, which is, I can't see it. The last thing I want to show you is this. Wonder if you can see what this is. So just yesterday, I had a Bughouse game against a certain Fabiano Caruana. And I was partnered up with Bakuz, whom you've seen in the chat. And we're doing okay. We're against 2,400 and 24, both 2,400 Bughouse players. We just had a one-off game because then Fabiano Caruana had to go. But yeah, I had a nice position. Bakuz was doing really nicely and giving me really lots of good pieces to keep me going. But Helm's Knight is Helm's Knight. She's the best, and she found a very beautiful mate with knights on h3, h4, and h5. Kind of smother, forcing the king out. Knights on h3, h4, h5, and checkmated Bakuz. So we lost, but it was a fun game. And if you want to see lots of not so much Bughouse usually, more Crazy House. So Crazy House is like Bughouse but only on one board. Then do add me, and if you're interested in Crazy House, also do join up on Slack. There's a Crazy House League starting, organised by Zero, ZHER0, and that will be fun. And so I hope you've enjoyed this recap of Season 12 of the Lichess 45-45 League. Actually, last word should go to the winners. Congratulations to We're Not Okay with Any Name Actually, and the six players on that team. Yes, Helm's Knight is the best. Thanks everyone for watching. Do follow.